When this girl tries to compete with our guy, Aziz brags that Turan's true strength is not his mana, but his rare ability to understand and learn magic faster than anyone else. To prove it, Maisa uses plant magic, making vines burst from the ground and even lifting Aziz into the air like a toy. But after only watching it once, Turan touches the soil, understands the principle behind the spell, and makes the same vines grow by himself. Maisa is surprised, but Turan is not finished. For his turn, he uses animal control to summon a rat, then performs a strange and disturbing magic that makes it rot instantly. Maisa tries to copy him, but even with her massive mana, she struggles to understand the spell, and when she finally forces it to work, the cost is too much. Her body gives out, and the mighty princess collapses in front of everyone. But before this, 8 years ago, he realized that he had special abilities. He was 10 at this time, and he was in the house, playing around with his power, making items fly when his mother entered the house. Instead of praising him, his mother yells at him, telling him to stop whatever it is that he is doing. His mother then calmly talks to him, asking him if he still wants to live with his mother for a long time, and Turan says yes. Since he still wants to live with her longer, she urges him to promise not to use the power from that moment forward. She urges him not to use the power in front of people, and Turan asks his mother why he is being restricted from doing so. She asks him if he remembers the story about the noble and the knight, and he says yes. Basically, they call the people who wield special power like him wizards, whether they are nobles or knights. However, nobles and knights are different because nobles are descendants of divine people, the Freyans, who descended to save the old humans. On the other hand, knights are descendants of those nobles whose blood has been mixed with humans, which is why there is a difference between nobles and knights even amongst wizards. She then tells him that the reason he can't use his power is that he inherited the powers of his father, who is a knight. She mentions that there are many evil nobles outside the town who treat knights as their slaves. She urges him to always keep the fact that he is a wizard a secret. 8 years later, Turan is still making sure he doesn't break this promise, and he continues to uphold it because he has no desire to reveal himself as a wizard. In fact, he has no intention to descend down the mountain into the village. In the village, 2 regular kids are playing around, acting like a wizard and a monster until the village's popular grandpa, Rabus, walks up. The little boy asks him what he must do to become a wizard, and he lets him know that he can't become one just because he wishes to. Rabus explains that wizards are the apex of humanity, ones who rule over humans from the highest realm. They are basically nobles and knights who inherit the ability to use mysterious powers from their ancestors, which means the 2 kids can't, unfortunately, become wizards. One of the villagers standing behind Rabus is surprised that he could be so blunt with the kids. Just then, he tells the old man that he heard about a monster that just appeared. Rabus confirms this, saying one of the villagers, Rop, came across the monster the night before. It is said to be covered in pitch black shadow, and it was a big leopard but big as a house. However, Rabus tells them not to worry because the village chief has already gone to the city to request a wizard, and he will definitely bring one back, so that the monster can be subjugated. They are relieved to hear this, and one of the villagers tells the kids that they are not allowed to go into the forest in the meantime for their own safety. Apparently, a regular person killing a monster is practically impossible, which is why a wizard is needed. One of the villagers asks Rabus if all the villagers are aware of this fact, and he says yes. The dude then asks him if the shepherd on the hill, Turan, is aware of this. Meanwhile, Turan is chilling out on the hill, resting while using his sheep as his pillow. Turan looks into the clear sky and complains about how boring everything is because it is always the same scenery over and over again. Turan heaves a sigh of disappointment, saying he will basically forget how to talk if this continues this way. Just then, Rabus shows up on the scene, trash-talking him for sleeping when the sun hasn't even set yet. Turan ignores the old man as if he were not there, telling him to move aside because he is blocking the sun. Rabus cannot believe just how mannerless he is, and he asks him if he is still holding on to the incident from the past. Apparently, this is an incident where Rabus wanted to quietly turn the sheep into shared property after Turan's mother died. Without holding anything back, Turan lets him know that he is obviously still holding this against him. Turan mentions that he is not generous to the point where he has to share his mother's inheritance. In addition, he lets the old man know that they are not close enough to be asking him how he is faring, and he suggests that the old man say what he wants to say and get lost. Turan's cold reply gets to the old man, who wants to crash out, but Turan's expression cautions him. The old man finally reveals why he is there, telling Turan about the monster that just appeared. The old man describes how big and dangerous the monster is, but Turan is not really moved by this. Rabus is surprised that he is not surprised, even though he is the likely target in the village. Rabus admits that Turan is insanely brave, and he doesn't even know why he is that brave, but he lets him know that the village chief has already gone to the city to request a wizard. He urges Turan to be careful because he is just worried about him. However, Turan argues with the old man, saying he is not worried about him because he is actually worried about the sheep, not him. Rabus wants to crash out when he hears this, but Turan just tells him to make himself scarce, since he is done saying what he wants to. He even trash talks him, telling him that his breath stinks so hard, leaving the old man to walk away dejectedly. Talking about monsters, they are beasts that wield mysterious power and magic. Just the same way wizards are to humans, beasts are to monsters. Turan is excited about the fact that he is going to finally see a wizard in person, but at the same time, he is not entirely sure that the wizard will be special, since it is a rural village that requested their help. Nonetheless, he is still interested in seeing one because he wants to know how strong they are. Moments later, Turan catches a sniff of blood, and he starts to trace the smell. Not long after this, he finds what is left of the old man who had just come to tell him to be careful. He has been torn apart like paper, and Turan is surprised that the old man just came to warn him, but he was the one who died first. Turan retains his cold, expressionless face while observing the body. He figures out that it wasn't a regular wild animal that killed the old man, which means it is the monster that did it. He hasn't finished making his deduction when the culprit emerges from the forest and the monster is just as it was described. It has a dark aura around it, and it looks really big with a fierce, scary face. When talking about monsters, they are considered to be so insanely strong that normal humans can't even handle them. Rap's son hears this and believes that their village is done for, but his father assures him that the wizard would subjugate the monster. He lets the little dude know that the wizard would not lose against the monster because they can take care of monsters with a single word. Now that Turan is facing off against the monster, there is no iota of fear in him as he calmly tells the monster to die. A huge wave hits the monster, sending it backwards, but the monster remains strong as before. Turan remains speechless since his first attack didn't work, and while he is busy racking his brain for something else, the monster leaps toward him. Turan uses another command word, telling the monster to stop, but the monster barely misses him. Turan is surprised that the two command words he has used have been ineffective against the monster, and before he knows it, the monster angrily turns around to attack him. Turan leaps backward to dodge the monster's attack, and he decides to get serious. Turan turns to the shepherd's way, and he whips out his sling. He places the stone in the sling and uses magic to harden it before sending it toward the monster. As it travels toward the monster, he uses another command word to make it even faster. As the projectile gets closer to the monster, Turan orders it to pierce through, and this generates a massive force with shockwaves behind it that travels through the monster's body. But this is not enough to kill the monster. The monster dashes toward Turan, but little does it know that Turan is not done because the projectile is already traveling back like a boomerang, aiming for its head. With a powerful and insane force, the stone cuts through the monster's head from behind before it can even get to Turan. With the insane force that the projectile moved with, the monster crashed to the ground dead, and Turan remained really calm during the whole thing. He decides to just dump the monster's body in the valley, while thinking about how the villagers just like to stress him. The next morning, Turan receives an unexpected visit from a bunch of angry villagers. They bang on his door with no courtesy, demanding that he come out. Apparently they are there to accuse him of killing Rabus, and the dude leading the charge grabs Turan by the collar, telling him that he is shameless. He claims that Turan hurt Rabus before throwing him out to be eaten by monsters. Turan calmly replies that he can understand why they would want to frame him, because the oldest man in the village died alone, instead of the young men who were too scared to fight the monster. Turan says they are choosing to frame him because it is the easiest way for them to shift blame from themselves to him. This really pisses off the dude, and he throws a punch at Turan's face, but he easily dodges the attack. Turan then launches a counterattack, headbutting the dude, causing his nose to bleed out like crazy. Deep down, Turan is pleased that he has magic because it makes everything really convenient. This is because if he wishes for something, it happens at the cost of mana. One of the attackers comes rushing at Turan, aiming to hit him with a stick, but Turan subtly whispers, telling him to fall over. His wish comes through, and the dude suddenly trips before getting to Turan. Turan continues toying around with the rest because he doesn't even need to do anything too serious to take them down. All he plans to do is deal with them well enough for them not to die. Turan soon grabs the stick from one dude and hits him in the face with it, while still using the dude as a shield to get hit by the others. In the end, Turan easily takes all of them while still hiding the fact that he is a wizard. After beating them all up, Turan berates them, telling them that they should have used the same strength that they used in fighting him to organize Rabus's funeral. After beating up the men, Turan asks the ladies with them if they are also there to fight him, but the women raise their hands, telling Turan that they want no problem with him, while telling him that they are just there to greet him. Turan doesn't really care since they don't have the guts to fight him like the men, and he tells the ladies to drag the men back down the mountain. When Turan returns inside his house, he knows that the event will not end there because they are still going to use this to rip him off when he goes to the village to trade. Nonetheless, he doesn't really care because he can just beat them until he gets a fair deal out of them. Turan believes that no troublemaker will come to disturb him again, since he has given them a good whooping already. He hasn't finished saying this when he hears a knock on the door, and he angrily flings the door open asking who it is. To his surprise, the dude standing in front of the door doesn't look like any of the villagers. Turan asks him who he is, and the man replies that he only wanted to ask a favor concerning his travels, but it appears that he caught Turan in an inconvenient moment. Turan apologizes for his rudeness, saying he had some uninvited guests earlier. Deep down, Turan doesn't even know if he responded in the proper manner since he doesn't talk to the villagers, even though his mother always taught him about manners. Trying so hard to make things better, Turan tells the strange man that he is free to come in if he is looking for an inn. Not long after this, Turan prepares what can only be considered a feast for the strange man. As they eat, they discuss along the way, and Turan lets him know that he doesn't really talk to the villagers because he was born and raised on the hill. In fact, he has been living as a shepherd all his life, and he tells the strange man that it is weird for the small town to get tourists. Surprisingly, the dude commends him, telling him that he has good manners for someone who grew up alone as a shepherd. Turan reveals that he learned from his mother, but he mentioned that she has already passed away due to an illness. The strange man makes the religious sign while assuring Turan that his mother is in heaven because she raised a good son. After they are done talking, the two get down to normal conversation, and Turan asks him what brings him all the way out there to the country town. The strange man mentions that he is on a contract because someone asked him to take care of a monster in the village, ultimately revealing that he is a wizard. Turan is shocked to hear this, and he figures out that the man is the wizard Rabus he was talking about. The wizard then tells Turan that he has a question for him, and Turan lets him know that he is free to ask. The wizard mentions that he can actually sense a monster, but he can't see one. And it is even stranger that Turan is really calm about the whole situation, even though he knows about what happened. The wizard mentions that Turan is the ideal target for the monster, but he doesn't look scared. The wizard tells Turan that he actually looks really brave for a shepherd who has never left the town, and with a calm, serious voice, the wizard asks Turan who he is. The wizard drops the bombshell on Turan, asking if he is a wizard, and this immediately sends Turan into damage control mode. In a flashback, he had asked his mother what would happen if anyone found out that he is a wizard. His mother explained to him that there are bad nobles, using shepherds like them as an analogy. She tells him that if nobles are shepherds like them, then knights are like the dogs that nobles keep. She tells him that they might tear him with love like family, but they can also sacrifice him if necessary. His mother tells him that she doesn't want this kind of life for him, and she reiterates the fact that no one can know that he is a wizard, especially other wizards. She lets him know that if they find out, they are going to take him away from her and turn him into their shepherd dog to be discarded at any moment. His mother lets him know that to prevent people from finding out that he is a wizard, he might actually have to kill people, and now, in the present, Turan is already considering this option. The wizard can see the cold expression on Turan's face, and he asks him why he is not answering the question. Before Turan can make a move to kill him, the wizard diffuses the tension, telling Turan that it was all a joke, but his cold expression has ruined it. Turan then calms down because he is also surprised, and he apologizes for this, saying he doesn't really have a good sense of humor. However, the wizard says he should be the one to apologize for flustering him. Turan smiles, telling the wizard that it is the first time for him to hear a wizard's joke, so it basically caught him off guard. The wizard then reminds Turan that they have not introduced themselves yet, and he reveals that he is Kaorn, a wanderer. The two shake hands on this, and Turan reveals his identity too. Turan reveals that he will be 18 that year, and Kjorn mentions that he will be 75. Turan is surprised by this because Korn doesn't look his age, and Korn reveals that wizards age more slowly than ordinary people. He adds that they even live longer, and Turan asks him how he ended up becoming a wanderer. Kjorn mentions that after serving the Arabian family for 60 years, he simply left and he decided to roam around without settling down in a place. Before Turan knows it, he and Kjorn have engaged in deep conversations, leaving him surprised that he can actually be that comfortable with a stranger. Realizing that it is already getting late, Kjorn tells Turan that it is time he gets going. Korn then places an Arabian silver on the table, telling Turan that it is the purest among silver coins, so it should cover the cost of the meal. Turan accepts the coin with all gratitude, while wishing Kjorn luck on his hunt. Kjorn tells Turan not to act like it is a farewell, because he might come around a few more times to mooch off on the way. The next morning, Turan heads to the field to gather his sheep, and he looks livelier than ever. It is understandable since it is his first time meeting a wizard and even having an enjoyable conversation that felt really comfortable. Turan admits that Kjorn had more humor than any adult he has met in his life. The night before, Kjorn returned with a game that he had hunted, and Turan just concluded that he is a good person. To Turan, he had always thought knights were emotionless hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. Turan is left baffled on how he can tell Kjorn that there are no more monsters on the hill. That evening, Kjorn is seen investigating the forest, and he notices that there are traces of a battle, but he can't feel a monster's presence. He notices the stone conveniently lodged in a tree alongside the trees that have been cut down, leaving him to wonder if the monster has already been defeated. At the same time, he is curious about who might have hunted, wondering if the village chief left it to another wizard aside from him. Nonetheless, he believes that it is a relief because if someone killed the monster, the area has already become safe, which is the most important thing. Suddenly, he catches a whiff of something strange, and when he turns around, he sees the leopard monster that Turan defeated walking toward him. However, things have gotten complicated because the monster has turned into a wraith, and Kjorn freaks out because he doesn't expect someone to do something like this. While he is still trying to understand what is happening, the monster attacks him, forcing him to leap backwards. Apparently, a monster turns into a wraith if one defeats it and doesn't absorb or disperse the mana from its corpse. It is common knowledge among wizards, and he believes that everyone should know this. The monster charges at him again, but Kjorn leaps into the air to dodge the attack, and he can confirm that the person who took down the monster is a wizard, but he doesn't understand why they left it to become a wraith. He wonders if the person is a novice, but at the same time he doesn't want to believe this because there is no way a novice can take down a monster as strong as the leopard monster he is staring at. Since he can't fully understand why the monster was left to become a wraith, Kjorn just concludes that he has to destroy it. Kjorn conjures a magic arrow and fires it at the monster, but to his surprise, the magic attack is nullified. Kjorn is shocked by this because this only means the monster's mana is stronger than his. Before he knows it, the monster vanishes right in front of him, leaving him to panic because he doesn't even know what else the monster has planned for him. Suddenly, the monster appears behind, launching a powerful slash at him. Kjorn barely dodges the attack, but gets slashed, and it is at this point that he realizes that he is dealing with a monster that a mere knight cannot contend with. With his observation, he figures out that one would have to be a lower-ranked noble to have a chance. Sweat runs down his face from fear because running into such a monster in a remote village is the last thing he expected. Seeing how dangerous the situation is, Korn concludes that he is done for. But he has no intention of dying alone, as he plans to take the monster with him. He starts to concentrate all his mana into his hand, planning to stab the monster with it directly the moment it lunges at him. Just then, the monster does as predicted, and Kjorn leaps toward it too, ready to sacrifice himself to take it down. Just before the monster reaches him, a powerful magic blast appears in the distance and cuts through the monster, ultimately defeating it in one shot. Kjorn's expression shows just how relieved he is, and just then, he hears a familiar voice behind him, asking him if he is fine. Kjorn turns around in shock, expressing his disbelief that Turan is a wizard all along. Turan confirms this, and Kjorn asks him why he didn't tell him. Turan stays mute when he hears this, and Kjorn rephrases the question, asking Turan why he helped him because he could have just walked away. Turan decides to tell him his reason, and to know this, he goes back to the night before when Kjorn returned with a wild animal he had hunted down. Turan asks him why he was playing a hero when he could earn a lot of money with his skills. Kjorn then reveals that the villagers are pitiful because they are living on the frontier with no basic protection. Turan reminds him that this isn't his fault, but Kjorn lets him know that he is a wizard who inherited the power of a god, so he believes that it is rightful of him to protect commoners. Kjorn admits that not every wizard thinks the way he does because everyone has their own thoughts and their own way of living. Now in the present, Turan tells Kjorn that everyone has their own way of living, just as he told him that night. Suddenly, the monster attacks them again, but they manage to get out of the way just in time. Kjorn then tells Turan that they can't handle the monster because it is a monster that one can't fight unless they are at least a noble. Turan tells Kjorn to leave and tell the village chief immediately so that they can evacuate, while he tries to hold down the monster. Deep down, Kjorn is worried that he stands no chance against the monster, but he still has no choice but to act his part. Just then, Turan tells him that he doesn't have to worry because if his last attack landed, then he has nothing to worry about. Kjorn is shocked to hear this because Turan is indirectly saying the last attack he used wasn't even his full strength. This leaves Kjorn in shock because Turan is basically playing on the same level field as nobles, or even higher. Kjorn watches as Turan starts to absorb the mana in the air, preparing for a devastating attack, and this is when Kjorn realizes that he is standing in front of a wizard who has the power to turn the world upside down. At the same time, Turan is willing to go all out because he is also curious about his limit. With mana overflowing around him, he is able to gather enough stones to serve as projectiles against the Wraith. Kjorn then tells him that he won't allow him to fight the Wraith alone, because, no matter how outstanding his talent is, the Wraith is a freaking tough opponent. Kjorn believes that they have to join forces, but he immediately changes his mind when Turan unleashes his first wave of attack, and he sees how deadly it is. He realizes that he is just going to get in the way, and the only thing he can do in that moment is to make Turan's talent bloom. Turan's attack leaves a powerful force, but when the dust settles, the wraith remains active. Turan is shocked by this, and Korn lets him know that he can't kill a wraith with physical attacks. Turan asks Kjorn how he is supposed to kill it without physical attacks, and he replies that the only way to kill it is through fire or lightning. Turan follows Korn's advice and tries to burn it, but this doesn't work, and Kjorn lets him know that he is getting it wrong. Kjorn cannot believe that Turan doesn't even know the most basic common sense of a wizard, because to apply a wizard's power to another living being, establishing the right process is a basic requirement. It starts to dawn on Kjorn that Turan might have been the one who killed the monster and left it to become a wraith. The wraith continues causing chaos in the process of trying to get Turan, but Kjorn has finally understood one truth, and this is the fact that Turan has never absorbed mana in his life. Kjorn then tells Turan not to light the fire, but he is expected to make it, then shoot it. Turan follows Kjorn's suggestion, and he starts to brew up a fire in his palm. Apparently it is normal for a wizard to make a fire, but controlling it is where the issue comes in because it requires special training. However, he is left in utmost shock when Turan conjures a ball of fire with little to no stress. Turan then unleashes the fire on the wraith, increasing the intensity the more it touches the wraith. The wraith screams out in pain, and Kjorn tells him to keep increasing the mana into the fire so it doesn't go out, because he has to burn everything about the wraith into oblivion. Turan maintains the intensity while retaining his calm expression until the wraith is finally burned into nothing but a charred skeleton, shocking Kjorn because they just won against a tough opponent. Kjorn is rattled that a wraith that would have needed a noble was easily defeated by a shepherd from the mountains. Turan then asks Kjorn if it is over, and Kjorn tells him to absorb the mana first if he doesn't want to fight another wraith soon. Turan asks him how he is supposed to do this, and Kjorn explains that he has to imagine himself draining something inside him. Turan acknowledges this, and he stretches out his hand to do as told. Just then, the mana starts to leave the monster's body and it completely enters his body. Kjorn tells Turan that he is going to feel some sort of pleasure, and Turan admits that he didn't even believe it at first. Kjorn is forced to ask if it is really his first time absorbing mana, and Turan says yes. It turns out that after one's first awakening, mana grows slowly with age, and the best way to grow is to kill monsters or wizards to absorb their mana. However, it is more shocking that this was Turan's first mana absorption, and he is already able to handle magic at such a level. This tells Kjorn that Turan's innate potential is on a different level. Suddenly, Kjorn calls Turan's name, apologizing for his rudeness while asking him which house he belongs to. Turan simply tells Kjorn to take off his injured arm first, and Kjorn is shocked to hear this. They return to Turan's house, and after cleaning the arm and applying a bandage to it, Kjorn apologizes for stressing Turan out. However, Turan reminds the dude that he has already told him countless times that he is not from an esteemed home because he is just a shepherd who doesn't even know who his father is. Kjorn then asks him why someone as powerful as him would be a shepherd. Kjorn assures Turan that he has no intention of belittling him, but he lets him know that it doesn't suit him at all. Turan reveals that it was his mother's request, explaining to Kjorn that his mother said nobles only use wizards and discard them. After hearing this, Kjorn tells Turan that his mother was wise. Turan is surprised because he was expecting Kjorn to call his mother an overprotective person, but Kjorn lets him know that his mother was wise. He explains that wizards have great power, and this inevitably brings conflict. He explains that some years back there was a major war between great noble houses, and it was a war between the House of Arabian, which he served, and the Great House of Zahar. He reveals that so many lost their lives in this war because out of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights, more than 900 died. Unfortunately, everyone close to Kjorn was among the casualties. Kjorn mentions those who died in the war, and this includes his beloved wife and son. Kjorn reveals that he was the only one left, which is why his mother was right to an extent, because a knight's life can vanish more easily and more meaninglessly than even commoners. However, he lets him know that his mother was wrong about one thing, and this is his aptitude. Turan is confused by this, and Kjorn explains that he is a knight with average skill, but Turan was able to take down a monster that he couldn't. Kjorn lets Turan know that his potential sits with that of a noble, not a mere knight. In fact, he lets him know that his aptitude is upper tier level. Turan then tells Kjorn that his mother told him that his father is a knight, but at this point, he already thinks that is a lie. However, Kjorn explains to him that there are children worse than a knight born to nobles, while there are also incredible children on a noble level born among knights. Kjorn then tells Turan that it would be better if he leaves the hill, and when Turan asks him why, he replies that humans need more nobles and knights. Apparently, humans are not the apex predator yet because the other races that were pushed out by the gods are still watching for a chance to rise again. In the middle of this potential destruction, the nobles only keep waging war against each other. Kjorn tells Turan that this is exactly why they still need strong and kind nobles like him. Kjorn walks to the door and asks Turan if he is satisfied with living as a shepherd. Turan takes a moment to think about it, and he asks Kjorn what he can possibly gain by going down the mountain, and Kjorn replies that it all depends on what he wants. Kjorn mentions that everything from fame to family is hard to obtain, but it is left to his imagination. As Kjorn leaves the house, he tells Turan that he could become a wanderer like him, killing monsters that threaten people, or become an explorer who ventures into the unknown. In fact, he can even get himself adopted into a house and walk the path of power. Turan follows Kjorn and tells him that he is right, because it would be interesting for him to go into the world rather than herd sheep on the hill. Turan admits that for the first time, he is curious about the outside world. On the other hand, Kjorn tells him that he might already be planning an unwanted expectation, but he assures him that he is going to support him with every possibility he has. Just then, Kjorn asks him for his bloodline ability, but Turan has no freaking idea what this means. Kjorn apologizes for dumping this on him because he has totally forgotten about the part where he knows nothing about magic. Kjorn then reveals that a bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestor, the Freyans. He tells him that the possession of a bloodline is what separates a knight from a noble. Kjorn then asks him if there was any spell that felt unusually easy and simple when he used magic, or if he has an outstanding ability that doesn't require that he use magic. Turan reveals that he has a good nose and he is also pretty good at throwing stones. Kjorn lets him know that his sense of smell can be considered a bloodline ability, and throwing weapons is also one of House Arabian's traits. He lets him know that it is a common trait, but Kjorn tells Turan to tell him more. After revealing all of his abilities, Turan notices that Kjorn's expression looks different from before. Turan asks him why, and Kjorn reveals that he has finally figured out which house Turan is close to, and Turan asks him which house it is. With a cold voice, he reveals that it is one of the great houses, House Sahar, the one that fought a war with House Arabian. The moment Turan hears this, he immediately understands the sudden change in Kjorn's expression. Turan can't believe that he is from the same house that Kjorn hates so much. This leaves Turan wondering what he can actually say to the man at that point. He thinks of apologizing, but then it dawns on him that what happened is a result of the actions of family members he has never even met, which means that they are practically strangers. Kjorn notices the worried expression on his face, and he taps him on the shoulder, telling him not to be worried about what happened because he didn't participate in the war. At the same time, Turan tries to say something, but Kjorn lets him know that it is an adult situation. He tells him that if they try to wash blood with blood, they are just going to continue fighting forever. Turan then asks Kjorn if he doesn't have regrets about telling him to go down the hill. Kjorn admits that if Turan goes down the hill in the pursuit of power, he will inevitably end up joining the Zahar family, but he assures Turan that he trusts his character. Turan has no idea what he is saying, and Kjorn tells him that he is talking about the goodness in him, which pushed him to save him from the monster. In addition to this, Turan revealed the identity he has been hiding his whole life. Kjorn says there is the possibility that if someone like Turan rose to power in the Zahar family, he could prevent a terrible war from happening again. Kjorn then turns around to leave, telling Turan that there is no need to think too much about the whole thing, since Turan has not even decided whether to join the Zahar family or not. Turan stops him, telling him that his thoughts are now clear because he would like to go down the mountain. Kjorn commends him, saying he has made the right decision, but Turan tells him that he is not going right away, and he lets Kjorn know that he will head down once Kjorn's injury heals. Kjorn is surprised to hear this, and he admits that Turan is a good person. Later on, Kjorn sits down to explain the basics of everything to Turan, telling him that to use magic he needs mana, which is why it is referred to as the key to omnipotence. He tells Turan that it is not a truly omnipotent power as the name implies, but he tells him that to use magic he needs mana that matches it. Turan then asks for the standard for mana that matches magic, and Kjorn informs him that the difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors. The first one is bloodline, the second is affinity, and the third is causality. The first one, which is bloodline, is determined by the bloodline that he was born with, and this applies to most nobles who are not knights. He makes an example of this, saying it would be difficult for Turan to heal his wounds with magic because he is not from the Ravista bloodline in the south that can even do something like this without training. As for the second one, which is affinity, Kjorn says it is more or less considered familiarity. This is the concept that a mage can easily perform tasks that they prefer or are used to. An example of this is how he made a fireball as if he was throwing a rock, and Turan confirms this, saying that if he had probably made flames, he might not have achieved the speed or firepower. The last one is causality, but he confesses that he doesn't fully understand it. Kjorn asks Turan what he thinks would happen if he tried to kill him directly using mana, and Turan replies that some light would shine from his head, and that would be it. Kjorn tells him that this is the exact phenomenon that occurs from a lack of causality. He placed his hand over a cup on the table, causing the contents to bubble. He lets him know that something like this happens when there is no appropriate cause for a desired outcome, and when what needs to be achieved is excessively difficult. Turan then replies that he has gotten the hang of the whole thing, because if he wanted to kill Kjorn, he just has to provide a cause of death that looks like creating and shooting flames instead of spending mana to wish for his death. Turan follows the same process by lighting a fire on the cup, while saying it would be more practical to kill Kjorn that way because creating and shooting fire is more natural than directly lighting one. Kjorn is pleased by just how Turan was able to explain everything, and he tells him that he could have become a professor instead of a mage. Turan tells Kjorn that he can control animals as he wishes, but wants to know why magic beasts need causality. Kjorn tells him that this is because of their mana, and the two continue having a long, boring conversation about how magic works. In the end, Kjorn tells Turan that the Zahar bloodline also has special magic, which involves being skilled in stealth and tracking. He suggests that Turan tries it out, and he agrees to this. Turan makes his wish not to be seen, and to Kjorn's surprise, Turan actually succeeds. Turan becomes visible again, and a worried Kjorn tells Turan that it's been a while since he's seen it, admitting that it is a frightening ability. He tells Turan that this was the ability that the Arabian Knights feared the most during the war. However, Kjorn lets Turan know that it is not invincible, even though it appears that it is quite powerful. Kjorn then tells Turan that he is going to teach him more magic training methods, forcing Turan to ask him if he is not teaching too much to an enemy family's mage. Kjorn tells Turan that he healed and saved him, but also reminded him that he trusts his character. Later on, Turan heads down to the village to inform them of his plan to sell the sheep and leave. In fact, he has already packed his things, and the village head freaks out, asking him why he would make such a decision without consulting them first. Turan simply tells the man to sort out a way to find a shepherd because he doesn't think it is anyone's business what he does to his belongings. However, he tells them to buy the sheep at a fair price because if they don't, he is just going to release all of them and leave. Turan says that they are free to try and capture the sheep after this, but he is confident that they are going to have a hard time doing so. The village chief is frustrated, but he knows that Turan is one who keeps his word, and there is no point in irritating him. The village chief has no choice but to pay for the sheep, telling him to do whatever he wants. After this, Kjorn and Turan set out, but Turan suddenly remembers that the villager still owes Kjorn compensation, and Kjorn lets him know that he has no intention of collecting the fee because Turan was the one who subjugated the beast. Soon afterward, they come to a fork in the road, and Kjorn tells Turan that this is where they part ways. He apologizes for refusing his offer to travel together because he is more comfortable alone. Turan assures him that it is fine, but thanks him for everything. With this, the two bid each other farewell, and Turan tells him that he hopes they meet again with smiling faces. As Kjorn disappears into the distance, Turan finally realizes the deep desire that he had always had for a father figure. Turan then continues his journey, and while crossing the desert, he sees a bunch of weird people in the distance, leaving him to wonder if they are merchants who go from village to village. Turan decides to approach them to ask for directions. The group initially thinks Turan is trying to challenge them, but he tells them that he is traveling alone and needs directions to the nearest city. The man with an eye patch then tells him to follow the road that they came from, revealing that he is going to reach a city called Murai. Turan then gets out of the way, thanking the group for telling him. However, as he is about to leave, the man stops him, telling him that he can't receive the information for free because he has to give them something in return. Before Turan knows it, the group has surrounded them and they are armed. This is when it dawns on him that he is dealing with bandits, and the man with an eye patch tells Turan that he is in a wasteland where no one would find it strange that someone died. He urges Turan to take off his belongings while they are being nice to him because killing him would just give them more stress. Turan then shocks the bandits by telling them that, since they are bad guys who kill people, he might just use them for practice, and the evil smile on his face is enough to send a chill feeling down their spines. However, the bandits come closer to him, believing that he is just bluffing, but with the flick of his hand, Turan commands the wind that sends them flying. Turan is surprised when he realizes that he could whip up such a strong wind with little to no mana. The bandits groan on the ground, wondering what just hit them, and Turan brings out his water gourd. He draws water from the gourd and shapes it into arrows that he uses to pierce a bandit's body. Turan doesn't entirely feel fulfilled because he believes that throwing stones is stronger and faster. At this point, the bandit leader realizes that they are screwed, and he starts begging Turan to forgive them. He assures Turan that they are going to give him anything, but while he is begging, the others are trying to jump Turan from behind. Just as they are about to reach him, Turan stomps his feet on the ground to create sand spikes that impale all of them, shocking the bandit leader to his bones. Turan then tells the dude that he has one question for him, and the dude assures him that he is going to answer what he asks him. He asks the dude why they attacked him without a plan because just as they have seen, he could have been a wizard. The bandit leader then replies that Turan bowed his head even when they were speaking rudely to him. In addition, he bowed his head when he greeted them, so they just assumed that he was an ordinary person. Turan thanks the bandit leader, telling him that what he said has just taught him something important. The bandit leader is still asking if Turan would spare his life when he looks up to see death coming for him. Before Turan and Kiorn left the mountain, Kiorn had told Turan never to show mercy to scum like bandits because they never hesitate to hurt others. Turan understands that he cannot spare bandits because a life he spares out of pity could end up harming 10 good people. Turan then prepares to leave, and he takes the same path that the bandits were coming from. However, as he proceeds further, Turan cannot help but come to the realization that he just killed people. Even though he felt some level of guilt, he knew he couldn't spare the bandits because Kiorn explicitly warned him not to. After walking through the wasteland and thinking over and over about Kiorn's teaching, Turan finally finds himself in a new world. He is able to look from above to see the small city of Mirai, and the moment he enters the city, he is blown away by the crowd because it is his first time seeing so many people in one place. Turan is stunned because even the architecture is totally different from that in the village. To Turan, he finally gets the feeling that he has come to a city. Turan then walks up to a man selling fruits, and he greets the man. The man assumes that Turan wants to buy something, but Turan tells him he is not a customer. He remembers Kiorn's words, telling him that he should look for an inn whenever he gets to a city. Turan asks the man to show him the way to an inn, but the fruit seller just shuns him off, telling him to get lost since he is not buying fruit. Turan wonders why the man is acting rude because he doesn't know if it is a rule that he has to buy fruit before asking questions. Turan then points to an apple, and he asks for the price. The seller reveals that it is 2 dupat, and Turan brings out 2 coins, which immediately tells the seller that Turan is an outsider. Nonetheless, he lets him know that it is also fine to pay with other coins. Just as he is about to pay him, Turan asks him where he can find an inn, and the man tells him to go straight down the road behind the cape shop before turning left. He says it is the building with a blue roof, and it is the biggest inn in the city. Following the dude's description, Turan arrives at the inn, and he is welcomed by the inn staff, Lena. Turan asks how much it is for a night, and the lady replies that it is 16 dupat. Turan agrees to pay, but tells the lady that there is something more that he is curious about. He asks her if there is a monster nearby with a bounty on it. Lena is initially confused by the question, but Turan is asking this because he has to kill monsters and absorb their mana. In addition to this, hunting monsters would also bring him good money, according to Kiorn. Turan notices Lena is not answering, and he asks her why. She replies that there is no such thing as free in the world, and after making her happy, she tells him to head to the city halls, but Turan has no idea what city halls are. Lena explains that this is where they handle various public affairs, and the officials who work there are employed by the city lord. However, she lets him know that it is likely closed since it is late already. However, she tells him to go to the city the next day because this is where he can find a monster bounty. Lena then asks him if he is a monster hunter, but Turan has no idea what this means. Lena explains that there is a saying that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they become a wizard, and she assumes that Turan is trying to become a wizard. Just then, a strange dude, Madan, who is a monster hunter, shows up behind Turan, telling him that what Lena just said is a fact because he saw it with his own eyes. It appears that Lena and Madan are familiar with each other, and she is surprised that he is still alive. Madan boasts that he already told her that he is not dying until he becomes a wizard. Turan becomes curious about what Madan said, and he asks him if he can say more about it. Madan explains that since wizards get stronger by killing monsters, the same principle applies to an ordinary person who kills a monster, which means that they can become a wizard. Madan reveals that he and his crew are hunting monsters to become wizards. Turan excitedly asks them if any one of them is already a wizard, but Madan says no. He mentions that in the city, there are only the Lord's wizard and 3 under him. Since Turan said he hunts monsters, Madan berates him, telling him that his gear is way too shabby and he doesn't even have a weapon. However, Turan lets him know that he does, and he brings out his sling. Madan is impressed by how worn out the sling is because it shows that Turan has used it a lot. Turan admits that he has because it is good for firing something about the size of an egg quickly. Madan then tells Turan that he can hunt fox monsters or rabbit monsters with the sling. Madan mentions their desire to add one more shooter to the team, and he asks him if he is interested in hunting them. As expected, Turan humbly declines the offer, but thanks the dude for the consideration. Later that night, Turan retires to his room, thinking about how chaotic the day has been. He wonders what is going to happen in the future because he didn't believe that he would actually leave the village. Turan is playing around with his magic when his senses tell him that someone is around. He gets up from his bed and demands to know who is outside the door. It turns out that Kiorn had told him never to let his guard down, even when he is staying in an inn, because being in a city doesn't mean it is safe. Turan then prepares for an attack as he walks to the door to open it. To his surprise, the person standing at the door is Lena, who is asking him dumb questions as if he were asleep. Lena tells Turan that she is there to keep him warm because she thought his room could be cold. Turan is completely confused, and he asks her what she means by this. Lena touches her chest, revealing that it is exactly what he heard. But Turan remains confused by the whole thing. Lena then tells Turan that she is ready to do what he wants for a small amount of money, and Turan asks her what would happen if there is nothing that he wants. Lena grabs Turan by the shoulders, telling him not to lie because she can tell just by looking at his face. Turan's expression immediately goes cold, and this is because he remembers Kaorn warning him not to get involved with inmates since most of them carry diseases. Although wizards are resistant to diseases, the issue is that he can pass it on to another woman if he is not careful. Kaorn tells Turan not to let his desire trap him into something he will regret. Turan ends up turning Lena away and she walks off in anger. It starts to dawn on Turan that living in cities is a big deal because he had an encounter with the fruit shop seller, and he is already dealing with Lena too. Turan returns to his bed, thinking about how they put prices on little things, and this tells him that cities are really cold-hearted. Meanwhile, one of Medan's crew asks him why he wanted to recruit Turan earlier because he doesn't look like much. One of them even says Turan has a cocky mouth and he will be good as monster bait. Medan then tells his comrades that Turan reminds him of himself when he was young. Apparently, Medan was worried about the kind of weapon that Turan uses for hunting. Medan wants Turan to stay by his side so he can at least live a bit longer. His crew members cannot believe just how good-hearted their boss is, and unknown to them, Turan can actually hear them from his room. He lets off a short smile when he hears this because he realizes that the city might not actually be entirely cold-hearted, like he thought. The following morning, Turan heads to the hall where he finds a rude official. He tells the man that he wants to hunt monsters, but the man's expression and silence remind Turan of what Kaorn told him about how the world won't be kind to him. Turan asks Kaorn why the world won't be kind, and Kaorn says, because it has no reason to be. He tells Turan that the only way to get people to treat him kindly and with respect is to reveal that he is a wizard because this will make ordinary people bow their heads. The official then hands him a book, telling him to take a look at it before handing it over. Turan realizes that it is a crow monster, and the man urges him to bring the corpse back if he can kill it. The man tells him that killing the monster and not absorbing the mana will turn it into a wraith, but Turan already knows this. The official lets him know that the penalty for this offense under the city law is execution. Turan then asks the official if knights don't hunt monsters, and the man replies that knights don't have spare time on their hands to do this. Basically, a knight's job is to maintain order in the city, while hunting monsters outside the city is for people like Turan. Turan ignores the dude's rudeness and leaves to hunt the monster, but the official believes that he is just going to die. Not long after this, Turan returns with a monster crow with a big hole in its chest, leaving the officials in complete shock. They are even more surprised that Turan was able to bring back the monster's corpse pretty fast. They ask him if he acted alone, and he says yes, and instead of arguing with them, Turan just asks them for the bounty. One of them rushes to the counter to grab the money, and as he hands it over to Turan, he suggests that he get some rest because he must be tired. The officials are left in confusion because Turan killed the monster in such a clean way that almost everything is preserved. Just then, the official who attended to him earlier notices that Turan is not gone yet. He asks him why he is there, and Turan asks if there are still other monsters that are worth hunting. The officials are shocked to hear this because they can't believe that Turan still has the strength to hunt more monsters. 3 days later, Turan had defeated 30 monsters already, and Lena gave him the best dish on their menu. Lena mentions that she is pretty sure that Turan made a lot of money, but Turan lets her know that money is not his only goal. Basically, what he is after is the monster's mana, and thanks to the ones he has hunted so far, he has gotten stronger. Turan figures out that his mana has increased a lot compared to when he met Kjorn. However, he knows that there is a limit to how much he can get stronger with weak monsters' mana. Moments later, Turan has finished the food in front of him, and he even believes that someone shared the food with him, but they tell him that he ate everything himself. Turan commends the chef, telling him that the food was delicious, and the chef accepts this compliment, saying he is going to make it better next time. Turan is about to leave for his room when he is grabbed from behind by one of Midan's lackeys, who demands that Turan give them money because they heard he has been making a lot recently. Turan doesn't argue with the dude as he slaps him across the face, shocking him and his friends. The dude's friend tries to fight back by throwing a punch at Turan, but he easily dodges it and punches him in the face. The first dude rushes toward Turan with a stool, but Turan easily blocks the attack before sending the dude flying with a flicker to the head. Lena then screams at the group, telling them not to fight in the inn. Later on, Midan shows up at Turan's door, bowing his head to apologize for what happened, while telling Turan that he has already scolded the two culprits, assuring him that it will never happen again. Midan mentions that the group has been tight on money lately, and they must have gotten jealous because of the huge amount Turan is making. Midan yells at the two, telling them to apologize, and they follow their boss's orders. Turan then asks Midan if things are that hard, and he reveals that in 3 days, they might not even be able to pay the room fee. Just then, Turan hands him a money pouch, shocking Midan. who asks Turan why he is giving them the money. Turan then tells him that it is repayment for the kindness he showed when he said he was worried, which is why he wanted to bring him along. Madan is stunned when he hears this, and he asks Turan how he knows, but Turan ignores the question. However, Turan reminds Madan that nothing is free, and he asks him to give him some information. With a bright smile on his face, Madan assures Turan that he is going to tell him everything he knows because information is what he is good at. The next day, Turan heads out on a hunt, which he believes might be his last in the city because Madan already gave him information about the next city, so it is time for him to leave. It turns out that Madan gave him some really good pieces of information, and it appears that Madan is also a good man. Even though he is not as seasoned as Kaorn, this makes him purer and kinder. Suddenly, Turan catches a whiff of a strong smell, and he dashes in that direction immediately, hoping that it is not what he thinks. Turan arrives at where he caught a whiff of the smell, which is none other than blood. To make it worse, he finds the dude who fought him the day before with a bloodied body. As if this is not enough, he turns around to find Madan's body on the ground, leaving him to wonder what might have happened. Just then, one of the crew members, who is not dead yet, manages to speak up, telling Turan that it was a rabbit monster. Turan turns around to find the culprit staring at him, and suddenly, the rabbit lunges at him with blinding speed. Turan almost gets hit but manages to dodge the attack in the last second. Turan then whips out his sling and hurls a stone at the rabbit, but to his surprise, the rabbit dodges the projectile. This is when it dawns on Turan that the rabbit is already used to defending against long-range weapons. The rabbit then lunges at Turan again, but this time around, Turan becomes invisible, leaving the rabbit totally confused. Before the rabbit knows it, Turan appears behind it, and he plunges a dagger into its neck. However, the rabbit still launches a counter-strike that sends Turan backwards. The rabbit doesn't waste time before coming after Turan again, forcing Turan to go invisible again. Annoyed, the monster starts wreaking havoc wherever it thinks Turan might be hiding, cutting down trees in his path as if it is nothing. After losing its strength, it lets out a loud shriek before dying to blood loss. With the monster dead, Turan absorbs its mana, and in the process, he notices that the amount of mana that he is absorbing is different. In fact, it is more than the leopard monster that he encountered back in the village. Just then, the last dude on the team who told him about the rabbit expresses his shock that Turan is a wizard. Turan confirms this, and the dude asks him why he is hiding his identity. Turan ignores the question, and he asks the dude if they have family members to whom he can pass their belongings. The dude sadly replies that no, and this takes Turan back to the night before when Madan was telling him about the nearby great city called Orem. Apparently, Orem has a library that contains thousands of books, but not just anyone can enter the library because only wizards are allowed in. After burying the crew, Turan reveals that his decision to finally head to Orem, and he wishes Madan a perfect rest as he walks away. By the time he arrives in Orem, Turan finally understands why Murai was referred to as a small city, because Orem can literally swallow Murai up. At the city gate, he is even surprised that there are loads of people trying to make their way into the city. Turan wonders if the guards are screening for criminals, but he is not entirely surprised because it is a great city after all. Just as he is about to enter, one of the guards stops him, telling him that he can't enter because he has never seen someone wearing such filthy clothes as Turan. The guard suggests that Turan head to cover and dust himself first. Later on, Turan gets access to the city, and he heads to the giant library, which leaves him wowed. Because of how big it is, Turan concludes that it was definitely built with magic. At the entrance, he is stopped by the guards who tell him that the library is restricted to only wizards. Turan replies that he is a wizard, but this pisses off the guards, who believe that he is an impersonator. One of them stretches his hand toward Turan, and he suddenly feels something strange in his hand. Apparently, Kjorn had told Turan that wizards recognize each other because, by sensing another person's mana, they can even tell if the person is stronger than they are. The dude almost gets crushed by Turan's overwhelming force, so much so that he even falls to the ground, forcing his colleague to ask him what is wrong with him. The dude assures his colleague that he is fine, but deep down he realizes that Turan is no ordinary wizard because he is at least noble class or higher. The dude immediately gets back up to introduce himself as Kenya, a knight of House Valtas. Kenya asks Turan which house he is from, and Turan demands to know if he has to say it before entering. Kenya says no, revealing that to use the library he's going to need permission from the Master of Valtas. Kenya then reveals that he is going to contact House Valtas. Before Turan knows it, something that he thought would be a simple process has already landed him in the Valtas mansion. He is taken to a big pool where maids attend to him, washing off his body. When he finally becomes uncomfortable, he tells them to stop, asking if he can wash himself. The maids then tell him that they will be punished if they fail to properly attend to an esteemed guest. To avoid causing them problems, Turan tells them to do whatever they want. By the time they are done and Turan wears the nice clothes he was given, even the maids are left in awe of his beauty. They urge him to forgive them, but he assures them that there is nothing to forgive. However, the maids urge him to stop speaking to them casually, and Turan cannot believe what is going on. Later on, Turan meets with the rude young lady of the house, a redhead girl, Azella. Azella asks Turan what house he is from, and Turan replies that for personal reasons it is difficult for him to say. Azella is surprised by this, and deep down, she is already thinking of a devious prank, since Turan is hiding who he is. Azella suddenly unleashes her mana while telling Turan to do the same. Turan does as told, and while Azella releases a yellow aura from her body, Turan unleashes a blue aura. Their presence is so overwhelming that those who are in the room are forced to bow their heads. After the show-off, Azella commends Turan before subtly telling him to marry her. As usual, Turan's expression goes cold in shock and confusion. Even Azella's butler is forced to tell her to stop saying unnecessary things. Azella tries to do damage control by saying it was a joke, but later turns around to Turan, telling him to still think about it. After Azella is gone, Turan checks out his fingers to see that they are shaking. It dawns on him that Azella's mana is actually comparable to his own. Moments later, he heads to the Patriarch's office, where he meets the leader of the house, Rug Valtas. After their introduction, Rug says he is aware of Turan's need to use the library, and he lets him know that there isn't any amazing ancient magic in the library. In fact, he lets him know that there is no secret method for him to increase his mana. But Turan assures him that he is fine because he never wanted any of that in the first place. Rug then tells Turan that he is not going to stop him, since he still wants it, and he reveals that there is nothing inside the library that counts as confidential information related to their house. Since it has gotten late for the day, Rug tells Turan to come back the next day, and Turan assures him that he is not going to forget his kindness. The following day, the guards greeted Turan with all respect after confirming his library pass. Turan steps into the library, and he is totally blown away at how big and magnificent the library is. He is still looking around when a loli appears beside him, welcoming him to the library while revealing that he is the librarian. He tells Turan that he is now going to explain the rules of the library to him. Deep down, Turan is left in shock because he is not expecting a little kid to be a librarian. He tells him that the first rule is that he can't damage anything because if he does, he will have to pay for it. Secondly, he is not allowed to take any book out of the library. He then adds that he will be watching him while he is using the library, but Turan urges him to give him some distance when he is reading so he doesn't become uncomfortable. Since the little boy is a librarian, Turan asks him if he also reads the book in the library, and he confirms this, telling Turan that he can help him find anything that he is interested in. The librarian asks Turan if he wants romance or history, but Turan simply tells him that what he wants is to learn basic common sense about the world. Not long after this, the librarian provides a bunch of books for Turan, telling him that the books are hundreds of years old, and he believes that they won't really suit what he wants. He then provides another set of books saying they should help him. Turan thanks him for his help, and he is amazed at how incredible the books are. Turan opens a page, and it is as if he were welcomed to heaven because of how amazing it sounds. Turan immediately falls in love with the reading, and he repeats the same routine every day. Thanks to this, Turan is able to understand the world's geography, the different races in the world, and the etiquette of wizards. In fact, he gets to learn about how various items were manufactured and processed. With each piece of knowledge that he accumulated, his world, which was an unknown space, became clearer and more vivid to him. Days later, Rug invites Turan to his office because he heard that Turan has been using the library really well. Rug tells Turan that aside from the fact that he is treating him as a noble, it is also an act of goodwill to allow him to use the library. The man then tells Turan that he would like to receive payment for this goodwill, and Turan tells the man to reveal what he needs. Rug mentions that a monster has appeared north of the city, and it has been attacking travelers. Turan asks if he wants him to hunt it, and Rug mentions that 4 knights previously went to hunt it, but they never returned. This time around, he wants a noble to step in, but Valta's house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Turan is not entirely displeased at this, since protecting the people is what wizards do, but he feels like something is off. Rug continues by saying the northern road has been blocked, and this is an important trade route for the city, and this has been like that for 10 days. When Turan hears this, he realizes that the issue has been happening even before he arrived in the city, which is why he easily let him use the library. Soon afterward, the group going for the hunt prepares to leave the castle, and Azella is one of them. Azella complains about how insecure her father is to have sent Turan with them. Also in the group is one of the family members, Marvin Valtas. As they proceed into the forest, Marvin asks Turan if he is interested in Azella, but Turan says no, and Marvin replies that this is a big relief. Moments later, they find a wrecked carriage, which was the handiwork of the monster that they are tracking. The soldiers look around to investigate the area, but Turan is the first to catch wind of what is really happening. He tells the group that the monster they are after is a monkey, and Azella is curious to know how he came to this conclusion. Turan points to the handprint in the distance, and he reveals that the monkey must have attacked those in the carriage before heading back to the forest. Turan tells them that they should be able to find the monkey if they follow its trail. Azella reveals that she doesn't have this kind of magic, and neither does Marvin. Turan then cuts in, revealing that he is going to try to have a look. Azella is surprised when she realizes which bloodline Turan falls to, and Turan picks up a cloth from the wreckage to lock onto the monkey. Turan senses where the mana is coming from, and he points in the direction that they need to go. Not long after this, they arrive at a stream where the trail ends. He tells them that the monster must have washed off in the water, and Azella is shocked to hear that a mere beast is able to do that to avoid being tracked. Turan tries to calm them down, telling them that it might have washed off just because it wanted to. Suddenly, Turan catches a whiff of the smell again, and he screams out, telling them that the monster is behind them. Just as he said, the monster emerges behind them, and it looks terrifying. As if this is not bad enough, the monkey hurls stones at them. This travels at a great speed, cutting through the knights, but Turan is able to dodge the attack. Surprisingly, he notices that Azella and Marvin used 2 knights as a shield instead of trying to dodge the attack. Turan is extremely disappointed, and he realizes that his mother wasn't wrong at all. The monster turns around to try to escape, but Azella orders the knights to chase it down. Just as they are about to lose the monkey, a stone traveling at a blinding speed moves past Azella's head, cuts through the knight's formation before tearing through the monster's body, knocking it to the ground. Azella and Marvin turn back in shock, only to see that Turan was the one who hurled the stone at the monkey with his slingshot. With the monster incapacitated, Azella unleashes her fireball magic on it, roasting it with an overwhelming firepower that almost heats up the ecosystem. Turan, on the other hand, is impressed that he finally got to House Valtus's bloodline, which is pyromaniacs. After she is done roasting the monkey, Azella admits that there was a sense of fear in her when the stone was coming toward them. While Azella and Marvin are busy teasing each other, the wounded knights are screaming for help. Azella scolds them, telling them to stop whining. There's even a dude whose entire arm got torn off, leaving the team to start rendering first aid for the wounded knights. Turan, on the other hand, is thankful that there are no casualties, and even though it was a surprise attack, he believes that they could have avoided serious injuries. He is pretty sure that Marvin and Azella are stronger than the knights, but they still went ahead to use people who are weaker than them as shields. Marvin notices the weird expression on Turan's face, and he asks him what the issue is, but Turan tells him that it is nothing. Azella then tells Turan that he is welcome to absorb mana with them. Turan agrees to this, and the trio surrounds the monkey to start absorbing the mana. Apparently, Turan had read in a book that even if multiple people absorb mana at once, the degree of enhancement doesn't reduce. Not long after this, Marvin and Azella stop because they are already at their limit, but to their surprise, Turan is still in the process of absorbing mana. Azella finally understands why her father told him to follow them because his level of spell proficiency and mana capacity even rivals her own. In fact, it is more surprising because Turan is a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. Later on, the group returns to the castle, and Marvin commends Turan, telling him that it was thanks to him that they were able to defeat the monster. However, Turan tries to remain humble, saying it was nothing special. In fact, he regrets the fact that he didn't notice it early, giving the monster the chance to land the first strike. In addition, Turan doesn't think the monster would have the search ability as well. They are surprised when they hear this, and Turan explains to them that different abilities awaken depending on the monster's external traits. He lets them know that the monkey they killed had big hands and big eyes, but it doesn't look like its original form. Turan believes that the monkey likely awakened an ability to throw things with great force and the ability to see far away or to see through the forest. Marvin is blown away at how good Turan is with these types of things, and Turan mentions that he looked through a monster encyclopedia at the library. Marvin is surprised by this because no one goes to the library, as it is considered stuffy. Azella admits that she went in once a long time ago because she was curious, but it was filled with difficult books, so she left without even reading half a volume. Turan then tells the two that the next time they get the chance, they should ask the librarian if there are any easy books. Azella is confused when Turan mentions a librarian because she didn't know of any librarians. Later on, Turan heads to the library, and the librarian welcomes him with great excitement. Standing in front of the librarian, Turan realizes that he made a mistake because the dude doesn't exactly look like a librarian. Turan suddenly asks the librarian how he knows his name, and this shocks him. Realizing that he's been caught, he reveals that he learned it from Turan's permit. He mentions that as long as it is around the library, he can see anything in the building. Turan then asks him how he is supposed to address him, and he replies that he doesn't have a name, so he can call him whatever he wants. Since he has no specific name, he decides to just call him the librarian, and the librarian makes the situation even more awkward with his adult talk. Turan asks him if he is from the Old Empire, and he replies that he wasn't a person to begin with. He mentions that he is basically a spirit, revealing that he and the library are one. He mentions that his current form is just a way of communication, which is the user's preference. Turan argues with him that his current form has nothing to do with his preference. The librarian doesn't want to accept this, saying he is a reflection of what Turan wants to see. Turan then confirms this by touching the librarian, and he realizes that his hand is just passing through really easily. The librarian reveals that it is frustrating that he can't physically use force on those using the library because if he could, he would have punished everyone who had taken books out of the library. Turan easily figures out that no one knows that he exists, and he replies that until that moment, no one has had the qualifications to perceive him. He mentions that his creator created him in a way that only those who are above a certain level could see him. This basically means Turan is the only one who can see him. Turan asks him what he means by this, and he mentions that he is talking about the bloodline. Turan then urges him to tell him about the bloodline, and the librarian teases him, telling him to ask his parents. Turan is forced to tell the dude that he is an orphan, and he decides to check it out for him. However, he needs his consent to examine his body, and Turan nervously agrees to this. The librarian pushes his hand into his body, and he reveals the things that Turan already knows about the pursuer and hunter bloodlines, which are traits of House Zahar. Suddenly, he reveals that there is one more, and it was mixed. He reveals that Turan is a result of two people with different bloodlines. Turan asks him what the other one is, and he admits that he doesn't know because it is still locked. Apparently, a locked bloodline isn't that rare in bloodline combinations, telling Turan that it is going to open naturally as he grows stronger. Turan finally confirms what he has been suspecting, that his mother was far too educated to be a commoner, and there is every possibility that she was a descendant of some noble. Turan then thanks the librarian for his help, telling him that he is grateful, but the librarian suggests that he stay one more month if he is really grateful. After this, Turan continued using the library, but the librarian was always by his side. Turan asks for explanations about books, and the librarian explains what he wants to know for him. In fact, he knows about knowledge that has been lost for thousands of years. At some point, he starts to teach Turan the laws of nature, ultimately blowing the dude's mind. Turan also learns about how every disease emerges from microorganisms and that the decay of living things is caused by the feeding of such germs. In fact, he was able to grasp basic principles too. Things like the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and the process of how living things get injured and how they heal. Later on, he conducts an experiment on decay, and his mind is blown when he is able to get it done. Thanks to everything he has learned so far, he is able to raise his skill as a wizard. He then tells the librarian that maybe some great houses are monopolizing the knowledge because if every wizard knew this, they would lose their competitive edge. The librarian finally understands why people's level of knowledge keeps dropping as time goes on. Before he knows it, 1 month dawns on them, and Turan tells the librarian that it is time for him to leave. The librarian is surprised by this, and Turan mentions that Rug is already giving him hints to leave. The librarian is devastated by this, and he leaps toward Turan, begging him to take him along, but he simply falls through Turan's body. Turan asks the librarian if he can leave the library, but he says no. However, he assures Turan that he is going to take care of him if he stays, but Turan rejects the offer. As Turan leaves, he assures the librarian that he will come visit from time to time, telling him that there are so many books he hasn't read yet. With this, Turan packs his things, and he leaves the city. He procured a map from the library, and from this map he learns that House Zahar's base, the Enril Desert, is east of Orem. Turan decides that it is time he heads to Zahar to find clues about his parents. That night, Turan camps out in the woods because he is not interested in rushing, since the clues would have disappeared all this time if they wanted to. As he continues his journey, he also takes out monsters along the way. The next day, he spots a horse protecting its unconscious owner from 2 dark elves. The two are frustrated that they are being pushed by a freaking horse. To take out the horse, the elves use their necromancer power to raise the dead monsters in the area. Turan remains in hiding while watching the elves carry out their deed. Turan is left between helping the man or not, because he doesn't know if the unconscious man was the one who even attacked the dark elves. The elves then decide to eat the other humans that they have killed, while they find a way to take the horse out of the equation. The fact that they are cannibals immediately irritates Turan, and he activates his stealth mode. Making sure he uses the stealth very well, he hurls a stone at one of the elves, decapitating him immediately. His colleague panics when he sees his friend become headless right beside him. He quickly gathers the monsters he raised. Turan launches another attack on the elf, but the bull monster in front of him protects him with its strong head. The bull then rushes in the direction from which Turan was attacking, pulling down trees without care, but couldn't get Turan. The elf panics because he knows what a stealth user can do, but he uses one of the beasts to fish out where Turan is hiding. Turan is forced to exit stealth mode, and the elf orders the beasts to go after him. Turan conjures a fire attack and he takes out one of the monsters, but before he can even readjust, the bull dives toward him. Turan almost gets hit but manages to leap out of the way. Turan panics when he realizes that monsters are fast. He thanks his stars that he has taken out one of the elves beforehand. Suddenly, he gets bitten by one of the monsters from behind. The monster closes its jaw on its heel, and while Turan is fighting the monster off, he gets hit by the bull, sending him into a tree. Turan is slammed into the tree really hard, causing him to scream out in pain. He coughs up blood before falling on his knees in agony, and the elf tells Turan that he is going to make him suffer before killing him. Suddenly, the horse kicks the elf in the face, sending him to the ground. The elf begs for help, and the monsters immediately gang up on the horse. They totally neglect Turan, and this turns out to be a mistake, as Turan is able to launch a powerful attack that tears the elf's head off. With the elves dead, the beasts also die, and Turan falls to his knees in exhaustion. The horse walks up to him to check on him, and Turan thanks the horse for its help. Later that night, the horse's owner wakes up and he is shocked to see a stranger in front of him. Turan casually greets him, and the man demands to know who he is. Turan tells the man that he saw him getting attacked by dark elves, which is why he had to save him. The horse walks up to the man, and he pets it, while revealing that its name is Tilly. Turan tells the dude that his horse is a good horse because it understands that it has to protect its master. The dude then thanks Turan for saving him, revealing that he is Aziz of Hausberg. Turan also introduces himself before asking if there was any particular reason he came into conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz mentions that he was simply on a pilgrimage with his retainers when he was attacked by elves without provocation. Aziz says he has always heard that other races were savages, but he never expected it to be this bad. Aziz takes a moment to cry before apologizing to Turan for showing emotions. He reveals that he lost some people who are actually precious to him, and Turan asks him if they were his family. Aziz reveals that they were knights and servants who came on the pilgrimage with him. Apparently, they raised him since he was little, so they are his family in one way or another. Turan immediately concludes that Aziz is a good person, and he asks Aziz if he knows how many dark elves attacked him because he was able to kill 2 of them. Aziz tells Turan that he has killed them all already. However, to make sure that they are not being stalked, Turan uses his search ability to scan the area to make sure that there are no more elves in the area. Aziz then asks Turan if he has any urgent business at that moment, and Turan reveals that he is in the middle of a pilgrimage himself. Aziz is surprised that Turan is on a pilgrimage, even though he is quite powerful, and he asks if Turan is the child of some great house. He also wants to know why Turan is alone, and Turan replies that it is difficult to explain, while revealing that he is not that strong. He explains that he only managed to win by ambushing one of the elves while getting help from Tilly to fight off the other. The 2 end up unleashing their aura to see their level of strength. When they are done, Turan is surprised to see the amount of mana that Aziz has in his mana tank. He realizes that Aziz would probably have more mana than him if he hadn't absorbed the Dark Elves' mana. Aziz assumes that Turan is noble-born and from a powerful bloodline. In addition, he is convinced that Turan hasn't even reached his growth limit yet, and this leaves him wondering why Turan is walking alone. Since Turan doesn't have a fixed destination, Aziz suggests that he come with him to the House of Berg. He assures Turan that he is going to repay him for saving his life and escorting him back safely to his house. Turan asks him how he plans to repay him, and this is when Aziz reveals that his family is a family of enchanters, vassals of Arabian, the great house to the north. Apparently, they are a bloodline that has crafted magic tools for generations, and he assures Turan that he is going to make the finest magic tool for him. Soon afterward, the 2 bury the bodies, and Aziz expresses his regret that he won't be able to send the bodies of his associates to their families. Turan lets him know that he doesn't have to beat himself up about this because it would be difficult to do so. Aziz then thanks him, and Turan asks why he is thanking him. Aziz replies that he is doing so because Turan isn't mocking him. Even though he is a noble, crying about the sacrifices of his subordinates makes him look pathetic. Turan is surprised by this, and he asks Aziz why he thinks this is pathetic. Aziz replies that this is basically what his father taught him. He mentions that his father says those who fall in righteous battle shall dwell in the heavenly palace with the gods, and to grieve for them would signify weakness. He mentions that a true noble must move forward, standing upon the sacrifices that have been made. However, Turan lets him know that this isn't a weakness, but kindness. Aziz then suggests that they start speaking comfortably with each other, since it appears that they are going to be traveling together. In addition, he doesn't think the age difference between them is much, and Turan agrees to this. Aziz stretches his hand to shake Turan while addressing him as a friend. Turan takes a minute to think about the whole friendship stuff, and when he realizes that it isn't a bad idea, he shakes Aziz, assuring him that he also looks forward to their friendship. Sometime later, Aziz suggests that they take a rest before they continue the journey, and he brings out a weird chest, which Turan asks him what it is for. Aziz mentions that it is a cold storage chest, and he opens it to show the several things he kept inside from the last time that he was in the city. Turan is blown away by it, and he asks Aziz if it is always this cold. Aziz confirms this, saying most foods can be stored for about a week without issue. He then shows Turan some more magic devices that he invented, like the danger alarm that warns when someone approaches. He also mentions that what he is currently wearing is a magic tool with a self-cleaning function. Turan is blown away by all of these, since magic items are not something that is common. Turan talks about how impressive the cloth is, but Aziz assures him that by the time they return to the main house, he is going to reward him with things that are far better than this. In fact, if his family is not going to allow it, he promises to make it himself. Aziz then tells Turan that he is also an impressive fellow because in their course of traveling together, he has seen him use several types of magic, from animal control to freezing, to levitation, terrain transformation, liquid manipulation, enhancement, lightning strikes, and luminescence. Aziz asks Turan if he spent his life practicing magic or if it is some kind of bloodline ability that allows him to master any magic that he wants. Deep down, Turan knows that he just has the ability to learn any magic, but he decides not to say this. He reminds Aziz that they agreed not to pry into which family he is from, and Aziz backs off, saying he was only joking because he is pretty sure that there is no way such a bloodline ability even exists. Aziz then asks Turan how old he is because he doesn't look that old, and Turan mentions that he has a month until he turns 18. Aziz freaks out when he hears this because he, on the other hand, is turning 43 that year. However, Aziz lets Turan know that the age gap doesn't matter. Aziz mentions that he should have suspected this when Turan was able to take down 2 wraith sorcerers. It's just that he wasn't expecting that there would be 2 geniuses in the world, and Turan asks him what he means by 2. Aziz mentions that they are both similar, but the other genius has an incredible bloodline. Basically, this other genius is his cousin, Maisa. Turan asks if Maisa can also make magic tools for him, but Aziz lets him know that she is from the main house. Turan asks further what he means by the main house, and Aziz reveals that she is a princess of Arabian, and there is every possibility that she will even become the head of a great house someday. Aziz explains that, unlike ordinary houses, the heads of great houses don't easily pass their positions to their own children, because in a great house, there are easily dozens of relatives in the same generation alone. At least one of them is always stronger than the head's own child, but in this case, Mesa, the head's child, was born with the greatest talent. Apparently, after awakening her magic power, Mesa mastered all manner of combat magic in just 10 years, and as a result, she received the full support of her house. At the moment, she is just 21, and she is almost at the same level as the core members of the house. Turan is forced to ask if the house performed a funeral for her to have had much power at her young age. Aziz confirms this, saying that when their granduncle passed away, his magic power was devoured by her. Other relatives also received portions, but she took the main portion. When Turan hears this, he realizes why the great houses maintain their dominance. Soon afterward, they arrive in the Deccan Plains, which is the central territory of Arabian. Aziz then leads Turan to the territory of the House Berg, Zavalin, which is a great castle. Upon entering the castle, Aziz is welcomed by his mother and the two rush into each other's arms. Aziz starts crying because he's missed his mother so much, but Turan cannot believe that this is a 43-year-old man. Aziz's father steps out, scolding Aziz for addressing his mother as mom, but Turan can't even wrap his head around the fact that a full-grown man is acting like a child around his mother. Aziz apologizes and then introduces Turan to his parents, revealing that he is a friend from the south. He mentions that Turan was the one who saved him when he was in great danger, and without him, he wouldn't have made it back alive. Aziz's mother is surprised to hear this, since the pilgrimage route isn't supposed to be dangerous, and she asks Aziz what happened. Aziz reveals that they were actually attacked by dark elf wraith sorcerers. The woman immediately loses her composure because she can't believe that the elves have the guts to go after her child. She yells in annoyance, threatening to gather an army to go after the elves, but her husband urges her to compose herself because she is the head of the house and people are watching, especially Turan. The man then asks Turan which house he is from, and Turan replies that he cannot say. The man is taken aback by this, and Turan rephrases it, saying he was born of a commoner mother, so he doesn't even know who his father is. Aziz is shocked to hear this, and he yells at Turan, saying he never told him this. Turan replies that he doesn't think it is something worth boasting about. Aziz's mother then assures Turan that he is going to be properly rewarded for saving her son. However, she lets him know that it is going to be difficult to offer him a room in the house, but she is going to arrange the best inn for him in the city. Aziz cuts in, asking his mother why they can't host Turan at the house after he saved his life. His mother says this wouldn't have been a problem, but as it stands, there is an important guest currently staying with them. She says that regardless of the circumstances, it is difficult to bring in a stranger of unknown origin. They are about to conclude on this when a female voice cuts through the room, telling the woman that she doesn't have to worry about her because she is pretty sure that the person who saved Aziz wouldn't be looking to assassinate her. Everyone turns in her direction, and the voice turns out to have come from a frail-looking but beautiful lady wearing a long gown. Aziz expresses his shock when he sees her, and he calls her by name, Mesa, asking her what she is doing at the house all of a sudden. The moment Turan hears her name, he realizes that Mesa is the Princess of Arabian whom Aziz talked about. However, Turan is surprised at how frail and cold she looks. Aziz's mother mentions that Mesa was nearly assassinated by Zahar's vermin, which is why she came to hide at the house. Aziz is shocked when he hears that there was an assassination attempt at the main house because it is the most fortified house in the region. Mesa replies that there is most likely an insider, and it is not a secret that the main house has one or two people with questionable loyalties. Mesa then says goodbye because she is tired and needs to rest. Aziz's mother then turns to their maid, Ina, telling her to show Turan the second best guest room that they have. After a restful night in a big luxurious room, Turan gets up early the next morning to have a walk in the main hall. He runs into Aziz, who is not surprised that Turan is up early because this is a normal thing for him. He asks Turan what he is doing all alone in the hallway, and Turan points to the lamp on the wall, saying he finds it interesting. Aziz then mentions that it is the magic lantern that he makes casually. He asks Turan if he wants one because there are a ton of them in the storage, but Turan lets him know that he is not interested. Suddenly, an overwhelming light hits the two from the window, which immediately catches their attention. Aziz tells Turan that Mesa is the one practicing her magic. Seeing the immense golden lightning in the distance, Turan asks Aziz if this is the Arabian bloodline magic, and Aziz confirms this, saying it is a storm bloodline. Aziz says he has never hated his own bloodline, but he has to admit that Mesa at this point is becoming a literal god. This leaves Turan curious to see how strong the next Arabian leader is going to be. Aziz asks him if he wants to see Mesa train, and Turan admits that he is curious, but he doesn't think it is a good idea for a suspicious outsider like him to approach. Aziz says this doesn't matter since he can vouch for Turan that he is not an assassin. In fact, he is even curious to know who is stronger between him and Mesa. Turan immediately figures out that this is the main reason Aziz brought him. Aziz admits that there is a grudge he has been holding onto for a few years, and he would like to see Mesa frustrated even if it is once. Aziz then takes Turan to where Mesa is, and Turan introduces himself to her. Mesa asks the two why they have suddenly come to her, and Aziz says they plan to join her in training. Aziz reminds Mesa that they used to do this in the past, and Mesa dunks on him, reminding him how he stormed out crying after she learned a spell that took him 1 week to learn in 2 tries. Turan almost chokes on his laughter, but keeps it to himself. Aziz then shifts the conversation from himself, telling Mesa that among the people he's met, Turan also has a magic talent that is second to none. Aziz suggests that they have a duel, and the moment Mesa hears this, she loses it. She unleashes so much magic power that it changes the sky and releases a scary aura that shakes Turan to his bones. After she is done showing off her power, Turan is left sweating in shock, and with this, Mesa lets him know that he is no match for her whatsoever. Turan is left speechless, and Aziz quickly comes in, telling Mesa that when it comes to mana alone, he can agree that she is far superior to Turan. However, Aziz lets Mesa know that Turan is a rare talent when it comes to learning magic. Aziz says Turan can learn magic more than anyone he has met in his life, clearly poking Mesa's ego. Mesa then suggests that they see what Turan is capable of since Aziz is bragging all about him. Turan suggests that they each show a magic that the other doesn't know, and whoever succeeds first wins. Aziz tells Mesa that this is a good idea, and Mesa agrees. However, she reveals that she is going to leave out her unique magic to make things fair. Mesa then makes the first move, and she slightly stomps her feet on the ground. Suddenly, vines grow out of the ground surrounding the entire area, and Mesa even grabs Aziz with the vines. She raises him and leaves him hanging in the air, revealing that the magic she used is plant creation and manipulation magic. She asks Turan if he can do the same thing, and Aziz, who is already getting dizzy, begs to be let down, but Mesa refuses, telling him to enjoy himself over there a bit because it is fun to see him struggle. Turan takes a minute and crouches to touch the ground. He knows that the magic that ignites fire only manifests the phenomenon of burning, and magic that creates water merely draws in invisible moisture from the air. Turan then says a single action word, which is grow, because he believes that following the usual principle, withering vines are the same. The magic is just to rapidly accelerate the seeds buried in the ground, which basically means it is not creation but growth. Surprisingly, vines grow out of the ground just like Mesa made it. Aziz is blown away by this, and Mesa says Turan must have figured out the magic's nature from the way he said grow. She asks him if he has seen it before, but Turan says no, and she admits that Aziz is right this time around. She finally drops Aziz, telling Turan that it is his turn to cast a spell, so that they can see what he can do. Turan holds back for a minute, thinking about what to do because he knows that using Zahar's bloodline magic would be courting death. Just then, something interesting crosses his mind, and he uses animal control to call forth a rat from inside the bush. Mesa smiles, asking Turan if animal manipulation is all he wants to do, but Turan tells her that this is not the case because the rat is just the material. Turan grabs the rat and then pours mana into it, causing it to immediately rot, shocking Mesa. After wringing the rat's life away, Turan drops it, saying he is done with his example. Mesa doesn't think too much about it and decides to give it a try. She calls forth a rat and grabs the rat coldly, while the rat screams in agony. She starts pouring mana into the rat, trying to get it to decay, but the rat only screams more while clinging to life. This leaves Mesa struggling as she tries to figure out what Turan actually did because it doesn't appear to be only magic. Even Aziz asks Turan how he is able to use such creepy magic, and Turan replies that it is what came to his mind. Deep down, Turan is surprised that a prestigious family like Arabian doesn't know much about it. Minutes later, Aziz urges Mesa to concede defeat since it appears that things are not going that well for her. But Mesa screams at him, telling him to shut up because she is pretty sure that she can do it. She continues pouring magic power into the rat, trying to get it to decay. Basically, when using magic, causality is a highly complex element because whether the phenomenon the wizard is trying to trigger is a natural occurrence or not, the ability to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is a crucial factor that affects both the success rate and the amount of mana consumed. One way to compensate for insufficient causality when using magic is to pour in a massive amount of mana and make up for inefficiency with sheer mana quantity. This is exactly what Mesa is doing, as she expends so much mana that she finally gets the rat to rot. Aziz is surprised that she was able to do it, but Turan knows what comes next. Mesa holds the rat in the air, looking exhausted while boasting that she finally got it done. However, she couldn't even stand strong, and before she knew it, she crashed to the ground, passing out. Aziz rushes over to check on her, asking her to wake up. Turan wonders if she collapsed because she used too much mana, but he doesn't want to believe that she passed out from mana depletion. He believes that she is only suffering from exhaustion, since the strength to reinforce her body has vanished. From a quick observation, Turan figures out the issue, and he carries her while asking Aziz if there is a healing bloodline mage in the area. Aziz panics, saying there isn't, and Turan tells Aziz to bring water and salt to Mesa's room, while informing the adults too. Turan is surprised at how light she is because he can't even tell if he is holding a person or a baby lamb. Basically, from the start, she was barely maintaining a body that she couldn't even sustain, and since her remaining mana is depleted too, she passed out. Soon afterward, Mesa wakes up in her room to find her aunt sitting beside her. The woman freaks out when she realizes that Mesa is finally awake. Disoriented, Mesa asks Aziz's mother why she is in her room, and she mentions that Aziz said she passed out while doing magic training with Turan. The woman asks Mesa if Turan did something to her, but Mesa couldn't even say anything. The woman then says they are keeping Turan in the temple under observation, but Mesa immediately speaks up, saying what happened isn't Turan's fault. She reveals that she only made a mistake, and she demands that everyone leave the room, saying her head is pounding. Before leaving, Aziz's mother tells Mesa that she made soup, which she is going to leave in the room even if she doesn't eat. She urges her to at least eat a little because of her health. Mesa thanks her aunt, and after everyone leaves, Mesa takes the plate of soup. The moment she takes a spoonful and ingests, a traumatizing memory flashes through her head. She sees her mother and brother begging for her to help them, and not being able to cope with the trauma, she throws the soup on the ground. Mesa clutches onto the sheets before grabbing her head in frustration. Meanwhile, at the underground chamber of House Berg, the temple of the limping goddess Turan is being watched over by Aziz's uncle, who is a knight, Haram. Haram tells Turan that the doors and walls are solidified like muscles trained for centuries without a single gap. Because of this, he urges Turan not to even think of escaping, and Turan assures him that he has no interest in escaping. Haram continues talking about the temple's defenses, and at this point, Turan concludes that he is just boasting. Just then, Haram whips out his sword, and he starts swinging, and Turan asks him what he is doing. He replies that he is training, and he continues swinging really hard, leaving Turan totally blown away because every motion is the minimum preparation needed for the next strike. This leaves Turan wondering if this is the efficiency of a trained body. Suddenly, Haram turns to look at Turan, and Turan apologizes if he was a distraction. However, Haram lets him know that he wasn't. He moves closer to Turan, asking him what he noticed in his movements when he was watching, and the question leaves Turan baffled. Turan replies that he believes that the movement is cool, and Haram is impressed by this. Haram mentions that most nobles dismiss weapon arts as trivial since it's easier to attack from a distance with magic. However, he believes that this is because they have weak bodies, but the mind doesn't command the flesh, so they rely on tricks. Turan says that unless the bloodline is specialized in strength, focusing on magic is more practical and efficient. However, after experiencing real combat, he says there are situations that come up where one has to face it even if they want to avoid it. Haram then hands Turan his sword, and Turan reminds him that he is keeping him there because he is a suspicious person, and giving him a weapon is a bit weird. Haram tells him that this doesn't matter because what he is holding is just an iron bar. He mentions that what makes it a sword is the body of the wielder, and with Turan's current weak body, there is no way he can cut him. Turan takes a closer look at the sword and realizes that Haram is right. Turan proceeds to try out swordsmanship, and the moment he takes his pose, he starts pouring mana into every corner of his body, including the sword that he is holding. Haram immediately yells at him, telling him that he is getting it all wrong because he is not supposed to pour mana into it. Haram then proceeds to show Turan the right pose and position while lecturing him on how to move and not to move. Turan acknowledges everything, and Haram tells him to do 10 reps while breathing into his muscles. As he proceeds with it, Haram commends him, telling him that he has a fine vessel, and if it is possible, he should wring his body dry. He says mana is mere parlor tricks because wizards have assumed that their physical abilities are guaranteed. However, this is only the minimum function that his body possesses. He mentions that a properly trained body tears through the battlefield without the need for mana, and he needs to understand the difference. Turan assures Haram that he is going to bear this in mind, and he continues swinging just as instructed. Moments later, Aziz's mother enters the room, apologizing to Turan for how she treated him. However, Turan says he should be the one to apologize, and he is thankful that Mesa is unharmed. The woman then reveals that Mesa wants to give him a proper apology, so she asks if he has a bit of time on his hands. Not long after this, Turan meets with Mesa, and Mesa apologizes for causing Turan trouble because she heard that he was locked in the temple because of her. Mesa believes that it was unnecessary, but Turan assures her that it was fine, and he says he is just glad that she is safe. Mesa then asks Turan about the magic that makes animals rot. She wants to know if it is an undisclosed bloodline magic because the mana consumption was absurd. She asks Turan if he lied to her, but Turan says no, revealing that Mesa should be able to use it easily as well once she understands the principle. Mesa understands that he is not ready to teach it for free, but she lets him know that if he doesn't reveal the method, there is no proof that it isn't bloodline magic. Turan immediately tells Mesa that he doesn't actually care if he wins or not, but Mesa is not comfortable with this because it is going to make her look bad. Mesa then decides to make him an offer instead. She tells him that if he can tell her the secret of the magic, she is going to teach him one of Arabian's secret arts in return. Since it has come to this, Turan agrees to teach her. Moments later, Turan explains everything to her, and she is surprised that the root is bioenhancement, but he used microorganisms that no one can see. Turan confirms this, and she tries it out. To her surprise, it works out pretty well, and she realizes that she lacked efficiency because she didn't know about the simple principle. Mesa admits that it is her loss, but urges Turan to tell Aziz that it was a draw because she can't bear to see Aziz getting cocky. Since he has explained to her, Mesa figures out that it is only natural that he is compensated for it. She reaches into her shelf to bring out her comb, and she brushes her hair with it. After doing this, she shows Turan how objects attract each other when they are rubbed together. Just before she mentions the name, Turan cuts in, telling her that it is static electricity. Mesa is shocked that Turan actually knows this, and she groans in frustration because it is considered to be one of the profound secret arts. Mesa then tells Turan that she is going to think a bit more about how to repay him so she can find something that he doesn't know. Mesa suggests that they train together from that moment forward until sufficient compensation comes to mind. Mesa says this is just to repay her debt to him, not because she needs a training partner. Turan agrees to this and suggests that they meet in the garden in the evening, starting from the next day. That night, the family sat down for an extravagant dinner that even Aziz was blown away by because he didn't even see something like this on his birthday. He mentions that anyone who sees this would actually believe that Arabian's head of house himself came to visit. Turan also knows that there is no way this is an ordinary meal. Aziz's mother then changes the topic to the magic tool that Aziz promised to make for Turan, asking him if he has something specific in mind about it. Turan replies that he wants something that aids in defense. He says it is easy to harm others with magic, but protecting oneself is difficult. In fact, if possible, he wants it to be able to protect him from surprise attacks. Aziz assures him that this is not going to be an issue because he has made items like this in the past. However, he doesn't have anything ready at the moment, and just then, Aziz's brother offers to make it. He reveals that he just finished a commission from the main house, so he has the time on his hands. His mother asks him how he intends to make it, and he replies that, for defense against surprise attacks, something Turan carries at all times would be the best. He mentions that he is going to embed mana into jewelry like rings, earrings, or necklaces to create a function that draws out a guardian bloodline's defensive power. The woman says this is acceptable, and she asks him for the time frame. The dude replies that this is going to take him 1 month, and Aziz's father boasts about how Aziz's brother, Mello, is a skilled wizard who is just second to him. While praising Mello, Aziz is completely overshadowed, and Turan tells them that he appreciates the help but believes that the gift is excessive. Aziz's mother lets him know that this is not excessive in any way because her son's life is not worth that little. The woman then tells Turan that for the next month he must stay as a guest at the house, so he should make himself comfortable. The next day, Turan and Aziz walk through town, and Aziz tells Turan that it appears that his mother has already taken a liking to him. He says the woman is impressed with Turan's magic talent, and in addition to this, Turan never neglects his training. After hearing all the good things the woman is saying about him, Turan says it appears that she is trying to recruit him into their house. Aziz confirms this, saying his mother gives generously to put him in debt, then introduces a pretty young lady to tempt him. Basically, there are several adults in the house who join this way. Turan hears this and admits that the whole thing is quite troubling, but Aziz assures him that he doesn't have to worry too much because the magic tool is just something nice to buy his favor, so there is no way he is going to be forced to marry even if he wants the magic tool. He concludes it with the fact that his mother is not so shameless. Aziz asks Turan if he has any other plans for the day, and Turan replies that he promised to train with Maisa in the evening. He asks Aziz if there is something wrong, and since he is free till evening, Aziz believes that they have a lot of time on their hands. Aziz urges Turan to patrol with him instead because Zavalin might not be the capital, but there is plenty to enjoy. Aziz asks Turan if he was planning on staying in his room till it is time for training, and Turan says that that was exactly his plan. Aziz refuses to acknowledge this, and he grabs Turan, dragging him along so he doesn't have a choice. He takes him throughout the city, visiting places like the casino, the food market, and even a film house. Upon entering the film house, Turan spots the poster of the character being played posted on the wall, and he is shocked to see who it is. It turns out to be Kiorn, and this forces him to sit down for the play. Surprisingly, the play is actually about Kiorn and how he is such a mighty warrior. At the end of the play, Aziz asks Turan about the play, and he admits that it was very good. With everything he heard from the play, Turan realizes that Kiorn is actually great, but his humility is unmatched. He decides that if he ever meets Kiorn again, he will ask him if the story is true. The next morning, Turan wakes up to Haram staring at him in his room. Haram asks him if he woke up well, and Turan says yes, but he would like to know why Haram is there. Haram says he noticed the day before that his vessel is pretty good, and he tells Turan to follow him because it is time to train. He lets him know that the body doesn't grow stronger by lying around unless it is taken through hell. He asks Turan if he is not interested, but Turan assures him that he is up for it. Turan knows he is going to gain more with this than just playing around. Just then, Aziz enters the room, talking about the play that he wants them to watch that day. He suddenly spots his uncle, and he comes to a halt. Haram tells him that they are going to train and asks him if he is interested in coming. Without hesitation, Aziz turns back and runs off, rejecting the offer. Turan doesn't know what is going on, and he stares at Aziz like a madman, wondering why he is acting so weirdly. However, he soon realizes why this is when Aziz takes him through an intense body training session. Turan is forced to do push-ups with weights on his back, and he has almost crumbled from the pain. However, Haram is not about to let him rest, and he tells him to keep going. After so much pain, Haram finally tells him to stop, and Turan crashes to the ground in severe pain. Haram asks Turan if it is tiring, and Turan says yes. Haram then mentions that it is good to be a wizard because an ordinary body weakens over time, but a wizard uses mana to maintain their body to remain in optimal condition. Turan is still digesting what Haram is saying when he tells him to start another rep because he must have been rested already. Turan freaks out in shock, trying to tell the monster of a man that he is still tired, but Haram doesn't want to hear this. In the coming days, Turan finds himself training with Haram in the morning while training with Maisa in the evening. Before he knows it, 3 weeks have passed already, and during one of their training sessions, Turan expresses his disappointment that he can't shoot his lightning attack straight. Turan believes that this is because he is not from Arabian, but Maisa lets him know that it is not because of this, since she has never thought of aiming lightning, too. The two are in the middle of this when a messenger arrives calling on Maisa. Maisa demands to know why he is there, since she already ordered that no one should approach her while she is recovering. The dude then tells Maisa that the head of the house has summoned her, and she demands to know what it is, promising to punish him if it turns out to be for a useless reason. The messenger reveals that dark elves are causing chaos in the south, and 3 cities have been ravaged already. Because of this, the main house is assembling an expedition force, and the moment Turan hears this, he realizes that the Dark Elves have finally made their move. Upon hearing this, Maisa tells the messenger to pass along her message that she will return soon enough. After the messenger is gone, Maisa tells Turan that she has to go, but then she remembers that she has to pay for the cost of the corruption magic that Turan taught her. Maisa asks Turan if he knows that electricity flows through the human body, and Turan is shocked to hear this. Maisa is surprised and glad at the same time that he doesn't know this. Maisa lets him know that this is an Arabian secret teaching, and she tells him that they can call the debt settled once she teaches him the magic that she is about to. She explains that when a person sees or feels something, a tiny electrical signal is sent to the brain. If one sees with their eyes, the signals go from the eyes to the brain, and if one smells something, it goes from the nose to the brain. It is through this electricity that the brain understands sensation and sends electrical signals back throughout the body to command movement. Turan doesn't really understand this, but he is convinced that there is a reason because the library's materials were the same at first. He wants to believe that this is part of the nature laws that Arabian has passed down. Mesa then asks him what he thinks would happen if he accelerates the electricity with magic. He replies that the speed at which one perceives and reacts will become faster. Mesa confirms this, saying Turan should just become a professor since it appears that he is pretty sharp. Mesa then decides to demonstrate the magic without delay, curious to see how quickly Turan is going to learn. Moments later, Turan tries out the technique and he focuses on sensing the electricity flowing throughout his body. Once he does, he decides to make the lightning transmitted through the pathway even faster, and before he knows it, he is able to sense things in record time. Even Mesa's speech appears to be slowed in his presence, and Turan is overwhelmed at how impressive the magic is. Suddenly, he grabs his head in pain, and Mesa commends him, telling him that he succeeded. However, he is currently suffering from what happens when one uses large amounts of mana recklessly. Mesa tells him that he will most likely have a headache and find it hard to adjust at first, but once he gets used to it, he will be able to maintain it for a long time. Turan admits that what Mesa gave him is far more than what he gave her. Mesa leaps into the air, and before she leaves, she tells Turan that it is an investment, since it appears that Turan has a bit of talent. She tells him that she will collect everything he owes her when he later reaches his potential, and after saying this, she flies off, leaving Turan in complete awe. Later on, Turan and Aziz head to the central city of Morgan to join the rest of the citizens to give the expedition force farewell. They even spot Misa among the forces, and Aziz doesn't hesitate before waving to his cousin. His father is forced to grab his hand, telling him to behave like a noble for once. Moments later, they are informed that the house head is stepping in, and everywhere goes silent. Just then, Turan spots the head of the house, Badal, emerging in the distance, and he looks like a beaten old man with scars all over. Turan talks to Aziz about this, mentioning the fact that Badal looks really pale, asking if he is sick. Aziz then mentions that there are rumors that a long time ago he fought with Zahar's househead and suffered grave injuries. However, this was a long time ago, and Aziz believes that he is just being affected by old age. Badal then walks to the stage and he raises his hand. Cloud fills up the sky and the weather changes in an instant. He delivers his speech to the soldiers while his eyes burn brightly. Lightning ravages through the sky, putting fear in everyone who is present, and the citizens start chanting Arabian's praises. Even Turan is left in complete shock as he finally witnesses Arabian's strength. He can't believe that with a body and condition, Badal remains at the pinnacle of magic that can overturn Earth. Turan promises himself that one day he will also be at a level like that. Later on, Turan is given the magic item that has been made for him, which turns out to be a bracelet. Mello says that just by carrying it, Turan's physical durability will slightly increase, and when he channels mana, this increases further. He mentions that in no time it will reach a level similar to a guardian bloodline noble. However, its mana consumption is severe, so he urges him not to maintain it for long. Turan is blown away by the bracelet, and he admits that it is remarkable because an item of this caliber is rare even among great houses. Just then, Aziz's mother asks Turan if he has considered joining the house. Turan thanks her for the offer, saying it is a generous one, but he is pretty sure that it is going to be difficult. The woman is not surprised by this, since Aziz already told her that Turan is someone who has much to do and cannot stay in one place. She apologizes for asking again, and Turan mentions that he is never going to forget the nice treatment he got from the woman. He lets them know that Aziz and the entire Berg family will forever be his friends. After this, Turan prepares to leave, and he runs into Haram, who hands him a dagger. Haram mentions that it is a magic tool and it has no extraordinary function, but it is pretty durable and sharp. Turan accepts the gift with gratitude while addressing Haram as his teacher. Haram smiles when he hears this, and after he is gone, Aziz places a cloak on Turan. Turan asks him what it is, and Aziz reminds him that he said he liked his clothes. He mentions that they don't get soiled easily, and they even repair slight tears themselves. Aziz then gives him shirts and pants too. Turan is overwhelmed, and Aziz laughs, telling Turan that he is a good friend. He says Turan saved his life, and by spending time with him, he has learned a bit about how one should live. Aziz then asks Turan where he is heading, and Turan replies that he just wants to keep heading east. Aziz hears this and tells Turan that he's going to find himself in Carmini. He reveals that he has been there before too, and he urges him not to take a ship if he can afford it. He says the waves are pretty bad, but Turan knows that he has no choice, because beyond those waves lies Zahar's land, the Enroll Desert, but he can't tell Aziz this. Aziz then urges Turan to survive and come back, to which Turan says, Okay. Moments later, Turan heads out on the road and soon realizes that he is back to his lonesome self. Since he is alone, he decides to run instead. He dashes off at a blinding speed, going past other travelers who don't even see him. They only felt a strange presence move past them, and no one could truly catch up to him. After traveling a great distance, Turan finally comes to a halt when his nose catches a strange scent. From the smell, he wants to believe that it's from burning animal flesh, and he decides to trace it. Moments later, the scent takes him to the origin, and he is left speechless when he realizes that an entire village has been burned down. The villagers are tied to poles and are set on fire without mercy. This leaves him wondering if it was a bandit attack because there is no way the Dark Elves have the guts to come that far. He continues investigating, and he soon catches on to another scent, which is coming from a cellar. He pulls open the cellar door, and to his surprise, a young girl is hiding out in the cellar. The girl screams in fear, but Turan urges her to calm down, assuring her that he is not her enemy. He says he is there to help, and this calms the girl down a bit. Turan then walks closer to the girl, asking her if she could tell him what happened at the village. She makes mention of a wizard, but before she can complete her sentence, she passes out. Turan picks her up, and from a closer look, he finds out that her condition is not critical, which means she only passed out from exhaustion from being locked in the basement for so long. Turan decides to take the girl to safety in the meantime, and by the time he returns to the surface, he realizes that he is surrounded by a strange force that is led by a lady. She points her ice bow at Turan, calling him a murderer, while telling him to surrender, ultimately pointing to a clear case of misunderstanding. The lady yells at Turan, asking him if the tied-up corpses are not enough, and he is trying to kidnap a child, too. The lady's second-in-command also tells Turan not to make a move, and Turan tries to explain to them that it is a case of misunderstanding. The second-in-command loses his control and unleashes a fire spear at Turan. The lady in charge yells at him for being so daft because Turan was holding a child in his hand. The dude apologizes, saying he only got too nervous, which led to the accident. However, the dust clears off, and Turan remains unhurt thanks to the bracelet Mello made for him. The wizards are surprised to see this, because there is not one scratch on Turan. The lady is left wondering what Turan used, and she assumes that it is a bloodline ability. Turan then speaks up, telling the group that he didn't attack the village, letting them know that it is a misunderstanding. However, he lets them know that if they attack him again, he is not going to hold back in retaliating. The lady takes a minute to think about it, and she agrees that there is no reason for the culprit to have stayed around. In addition, sparing one child after causing such a tragedy doesn't make sense. She then introduces herself as Bison, while asking Turan for his name. Bison then tells Turan that she needs a way to trust him, even if all the evidence points to the fact that he didn't do it. Turan then tells them that they can ask the child he is holding when she wakes up because she appears to have seen the actual culprit. Bison is shocked when she hears this, since she didn't expect the kid to have seen the culprit, whom they call the Burner. Turan asks for clarity on this, and Bison explains that the Burner is a deranged wizard who burned down the village. Apparently, for the past few months, the Burner has been attacking remote villages, binding people, and burning them to death. Since there are no survivors after the attacks, no one even knows their gender. The only thing that they know is that they are called the Burner. Later on, the girl wakes up, and she explains that the Burner has a red cloak and a face with facial hair. In fact, he looks rough as a woodcutter. After hearing the description from the girl, Bison and her squad apologize to Turan for jumping to conclusions. Turan remembers what Midan said about some nobles whose eagerness gets ahead of them sometimes. Turan then tells Bison that he is not going to take offense because Bazan was concerned about the girl's safety. Turan then asks them if they are there to catch the Burner, and she says yes. She mentions that now that they have a description of the culprit, she believes that they can finally catch him. She reveals that they have a natural-born pursuer among them, and Turan asks her if the pursuer is from House Zahar. He also wants to know what she is doing in Arabian territory, and Bison quickly mentions that she is from House Carmina. Apparently, she came from Avicha, and the guys with her are her friends who are her house's vassals. Bison reveals that the pursuer, Asha, is a descendant of the generation of their ancestors who mixed Zahar noble blood. Bison reveals that their bloodline manifested weakly, so Asha is skilled in search magic, but lacks talent in concealment, which is why the house calls people like them the primordial bloodline. Bison then presents a request to Turan, asking if he can help them hunt down the Burner. Bison tells Turan that she is going to give him all the bounty on the Burner and can even yield her own share of mana because what matters to her is her reputation. Turan then asks Bison if they have an idea how strong the Burner is, and Bison says she is pretty sure that he is a noble-level wizard. Apparently, in one of the villages that he attacked, there were knights defending the village, and he killed them all. Turan is surprised to hear this, but at the same time he believes that he is the right opponent for him because low-rank monsters in the wild are no longer enough to help him grow stronger anymore. Because of this, he agrees to help them, but before they leave, they head to the nearest village, and Turan hands the girl over to an orphanage. He gives the owner a pouch full of money that is enough to take care of the girl until she grows up. The man assures Turan that they are going to do their best to take care of the girl. Turan gives the man a cold stare before telling him that he is going to come back in a few years to check. Turan's stare is enough to put fear in the man's body, and he knows that he can't even afford to mess up. Once they are ready, Asha activates her power, and she starts tracking the burner. She points them in the direction that they need to go, and sometime later, Turan asks Asha what exactly she is looking for. Asha mentions that they first found the footprints of an adult male, and by the time it led to the main road, they picked up the smell of ash. She says if the burner hasn't changed clothes, ash would still be on him. Turan is impressed when he hears this because it shows how much of a professional she is. Basically, she couldn't find him before because she didn't know the burner's gender. Just then, Asha mentions that she has found the culprit and she dashes off in a hurry, forcing the others to chase after her. Soon afterward, they arrive at the entrance of a cave and Bison tells Turan to stay in front with her while the others follow from behind. Bison lights up the way with her magic, and as they move deeper into the cave, Bison asks Asha if there is someone inside and she tells her that there is one person at the end of the cave. After walking for some minutes, they finally reach the end of the cave where they found the burner. The girl's description matches what they are looking at, and even Asha confirms that he is the one because she can smell everything on him. Bison immediately aims her bow at him, asking him if he is the one who has been murdering the villagers from nearby towns. The burner acts defenseless at first, but before they know it, he unleashes a powerful fire spell on them. The firepower is so overwhelming that it pushes those who are behind Turan back. However, Turan and Bison remain unharmed, and this shocks the burner to his bones. Bison then makes her move by firing an arrow into the burner's leg, causing him to crash to the ground in pain. The burner then does something shocking as he activates earth magic that creates giant clay arms. Turan is surprised to see this, since he assumes that the dude is from a pyromaniac's bloodline. The arms start attacking, but Turan leaps out of the way before he gets caught, and the moment he gets a straight shot at the burner, he swings his weapon sleeve at him, cutting off his arm in an instant. Turan then incapacitates him by hitting him with lightning magic that runs through the burner's body so hard that he screams in agony. Bison finally crawls out of the earth where she was trapped, and she asks Turan if he has defeated the burner, and he says yes. He tells her to check on the others while he takes care of the situation. Turan then pours vine seeds on the ground, and he uses his magic to grow them to bind the burner. Turan uses this to seal his eyes, legs, and even hands before waking him up. The burner comes back to life and immediately tries to use magic, but Turan places a dagger to his neck, telling him not to try it unless he wants to die. The burner calms down, and he asks who they are and how they found the cave. Bison replies that they have their ways, but she wants to know if he is truly the burner. The dude keeps mute, and Turan angrily pushes the dagger into his thigh, causing him to scream out in pain. Turan asks him why he is burning the villagers in the area to death, and he claims God told him this. He mentions that if he burns the souls and flesh of those laden with sin, he can draw closer to God. Bison and the others are shocked to hear this, and he continues by saying God taught him and others the secret way to gain bloodline power. He says that just a few more times of burning humans to death, and he would have gained the pyromaniac's bloodline. Bison tells the burner that he is pretty insane to think he could gain an inborn bloodline that way. Turan then remembers what Madan said about ordinary people gaining power by killing monsters because he has seen several wizards do it. The burner continues rambling about how there is just a little sacrifice left and he would have gained the power of a pyromaniac. Turan figures out that the dude is not actually talking crazy, and this is because he has been able to figure out the secret of the world. Without thinking too much about it, Turan cuts the burner's neck, killing him on the spot. The knights almost throw up when they see this, and Bison asks them what the issue is. They reveal that it feels pretty awful to kill someone who is tied up and unable to resist. Bison tells them to stop saying trash, reminding them that they could have died in the cave if things had gone wrong, so she doesn't expect them to be sympathetic whatsoever. In addition, Bison says that all the people the burner has killed have been so many that no matter how much he suffers, it can never be enough. Turan then picks up the burner's book, and just from the first page, he realizes that this is enough evidence that he is the burner. Turan looks through the book and is blown away because there are combination formulas he hasn't even seen before inside the book. He wonders if the voice in the burner's head also told him this. Just then, Bison calls Turan's name, telling him that it is time for them to absorb the burner's mana. The group then gathers to absorb the burner's mana, and after this, Bison receives an award from her family for taking down the burner. Bison lets Turan know that they plan to travel around a bit more while hunting some monsters, and she asks Turan what he wants to do. She hands him the promised money, and Turan replies that he is headed straight to Avicha. Bisen then reminds Turan about what she told him, and he assures her that he won't go blabbing about it elsewhere because it is going to cause great chaos even if it isn't true. With this, they go their separate ways, and Turan figures out that there is no need for him to mention that there isn't definitive proof yet. As he walks through a wasteland, he figures out that fire magic in the area appears to be weak, but water magic, on the other hand, appears to be great. This basically tells him that he is close, and in no time, he finally makes it to Avicha. Turan heads into an inn where he sees a ship captain talking to his colleague about how dreadful it is to cross Enril. In fact, the last time they went through there, the pirates almost turned his ship into a sponge. The captain even believes that if it continues this way, they're going to be paying out funeral expenses instead of sailors' wages. The captain talks about how good it would be if they could get their hands on a skilled knight. Just then, Turan walks up to him, asking him if he's heading to Enril, and the captain replies that they are leaving the next day, but their ship doesn't have enough room for extra cargo. He says taking one more person means he would have to leave a barrel of booze, and this goes against his principles. Just then, Turan places his hand on the captain's cup and he freezes it completely. The captain is left in shock when he sees this, and even the other sailors who are present almost pee their pants. They are left asking themselves what a knight is doing in such a place. Turan then tells the captain that he is free to speak comfortably because he is the one asking to be hired. The captain acknowledges and then asks Turan what brings him to the place. Turan replies that he would like to let him board a ship heading to Enril. He assures the captain that he is an employee, not a passenger, promising to fend off pirates or merfolk attacks, using this as payment for his passage. The captain then tells Turan that their ship is in a bad condition, so they can't provide a room befitting a knight's status. Turan assures him that he doesn't care about getting paid or the ship's conditions as long as he gets to the Enril desert. Since this is the case, the captain happily accepts the deal and he welcomes Turan aboard. Meanwhile, the expedition forces taking on the elves are seen engaging in a tough battle. An exceptional knight cuts down elves like paper, but he is suddenly overwhelmed. Just as he is about to be overpowered, Mesa appears from above, turning the attacking elves into roasted meat with her overpowered lightning attack. The knight thanks Mesa for the assist, and Mesa tells him to rejoin the rest of the unit, and he dashes off to join the others. Just then, Mesa's uncle, Kadram Arabian, who is the squad's vice captain, shows up, asking her if she is fine. She assures her uncle that she is good, and Kadram urges her not to overexert herself because she is far more precious than the lives of a knight or two. Mesa lets Kadram know that she is good, as she is more concerned about the progress of the battle. Kadram says it is going pretty well, revealing that the entire area will soon be reclaimed, but they haven't found the tunnels. Mesa tells her uncle that he should let her know when they find the tunnels, promising to go there herself. After saying this, she dashes off without caring, and Kadram is left groaning in frustration because he believes that his brother raised Mesa too carelessly. He fears that at this rate Mesa is going to end up like her brother and mother. Turan, on the other hand, stands at the side of the ship, thinking about how he is going to get clues even when he arrives in the land of Zahar. Since he doesn't know his father's status, there is no way he is going to know what might happen when he gets to Zahar. Basically, the only clues he has are the few heirlooms and a portrait of his mother's face. He wonders how long it is going to take him to find information about his mother with just these things. The captain soon shows up behind him, asking him what has gotten him to stand there, thinking so deeply, and Turan replies that he is only thinking about how vast the ocean is. The captain agrees to this, and he asks Turan how he is handling the seasickness because he's heard that land folks usually get nauseous just by looking at vastness. Turan assures the captain that he is actually feeling pretty good, and the captain says he's heard about Turan's quest to learn seafaring. Turan replies that he only wanted the knowledge, and with what he's learned so far, he can say that it is pretty interesting. Just then, the alarm for mealtime comes on, and everyone sits to eat before returning to work. While eating, the chef tells Turan that it might not be the best food, but the pickled cabbage is quite important. He says this is the reason they haven't died of gum disease, and Turan asks him what gum disease is. He mentions that it is a disease where one's gums bleed and they die. However, if they eat sour food, they get better. Since fruits spoil quickly, pickled cabbage makes for the best, though the taste is bad. Turan is blown away, and he asks the old man how he knows this. The old man replies that he is pretty sure that someone figured it out at some point, and from there, it just spread. He mentions that before it was discovered, people used to eat merfolk raw. Suddenly, the alarm goes off, alerting everyone to an incoming ship at 2 o'clock. The watchman takes charge, trying to figure out if the ship is a pirate ship. The moment they learn that there are no flags flying on the ship, the chef concludes that they are pirates. The old man is pissed that they had to show up at a time when everything was going smoothly. The captain then orders the sailors to get ready for combat. The old man asks the captain if he plans on running, but the captain lets him know that they are going to catch up at some point since their ship is faster. The captain then asks Turan if he is fine, and Turan assures the captain that as long as there are no knights or nobles inside the ship, there should be no problem. The captain then tells them to steer the ship in the direction of the pirates because they are engaging in the fight. The crew members start singing Turan's praises before he has even shown them what he is capable of doing. Moments later, the pirate ship reaches them, and the pirates start yelling at the crew members to surrender so that they can spare their lives. Turan asks the old man if this is true, and the old man tells him that if throwing them into the sea after cutting off their legs counts as sparing them, then they are telling the truth. Upon hearing this, Turan leaps onto the pirate ship, and the moment he lands on the ship, the pirates immediately know that there is trouble. Turan conjures water from the ocean and starts molding it into ice spears. The pirate leader sees this and freaks out, telling his men to kill Turan immediately. However, Turan already marks all of them for death, since they have been known not to be good people. Without hesitation, he unleashes the ice spears on them, tearing through them without mercy. The pirate leader yells at his teammates, telling them to stop Turan, but before he knows it, Turan has wiped out a couple of his teammates. However, the pirate leader still believes that they can go up against Turan, and he tells them to swarm Turan because if they don't, they are going to be the ones to die. Following their boss's instructions, the pirates surround Turan, aiming to take him down at the same time. Turan then pulls in water from the ocean, and he turns it into an ice sword. The first dude that charges at him as he does loses his hand before his head even leaves his body. Even though Turan just killed their colleague in the most brutal way, the pirates seem to be hell-bent on taking him down as they all charge toward him. They lunge at him with their swords, but Turan blocks their attacks with his ice sword before slapping their swords out of their hands. Once they are open, Turan opens holes in their heads with his sword. One manages to get close enough, but Turan cuts him up vertically. He picks up a pole and uses it to impale another charging pirate. While doing this, Turan remains cool, and one of them almost gets him, but he leaps backward, dodging the strike. Turan then extends his sword to reach a greater length. One strike from this is enough to decapitate a bunch of pirates without mercy. Suddenly, one of the pirates he had already beat to the ground gets back up and crept up on Turan from behind, grabbing onto him. Two pirates decide to charge towards Turan to use this opportunity to take him down. However, the trio is met with a surprising revelation as their weapons fail to even penetrate Turan's body. Before they can get themselves back into the reality of things, Turan pushes his sword into the dude holding on to him. He cuts the hands of the other two before carving them up gruesomely. Turan then goes on the offense as he dashes toward the pirates, relieving them of their heads one after the other. Their heads fly all over the ship while their blood soaks the ship. Their screams can be heard from a distance as Turan sends them to their ancestors. By the time Turan is done, what is left is nothing but carnage. The main ship then throws anchors to draw the ship closer so that they can access the pirate ship. The crew is left in complete shock because they never expected Turan to have single-handedly wiped out the pirates. The captain even teases Turan, telling him that if he continues this way, there won't be anything left for the crew to do. The crew starts singing his praises while cursing out the pirates. One of the crew members sees how bloodied Turan is, and he suggests that he visit a physician, but Turan lets him know that there is no need for this because he is not actually hurt anywhere. Turan mentions that the blood on him all belongs to the pirates. After washing up, Turan meets the captain in his office, and he informs Turan that he has searched the ship. It turns out that the ship was a merchant vessel that went missing in Abaca some years ago. The pirates captured it and gave it a new paint so that they could use it themselves, which is something that they are used to doing. Turan then asks the captain what he plans to do, and the captain tells him that since he was the one who finished the fight himself, the ownership of the item belongs to Turan. The captain congratulates him on becoming a ship owner, and Turan is surprised to hear this. Turan then asks the captain what is usually done in situations like this, and he replies that there are several ways. The captain tells him that he can take it back to Abacha and tell the original owner that he found it, while bowing his head for a reward. However, he should be aware that the paperwork and catering to bureaucrats will take a month or two from him. The other way is to go to the Enro Desert and sell it there. However, to the captain, it is best to sell it at the Northern Sea Islands, which are along their way. He mentions that this is a neighborhood that is always desperate for ships, and the rule is to sell to the one who needs it to get the highest price. However, to move a ship as big as this will require that he mobilize some of his crewmen since he can't sail the ship himself. If he is going to use some of his men, he should be ready to pay them, and he is pretty sure that Turan understands this. While they are talking about this, the crew is cleaning up the ship, and they have dumped the bodies of the pirates in the ocean. The captain tells Turan that if he can give them 10% of the profit, they are going to help him get it to where it needs to be. Turan then proposes a better deal. He tells the captain to handle everything up to the sale for 20% of the profit, and the captain doesn't hesitate before accepting the deal. The captain mentions that he knows a few people over at the island, and he is pretty sure that they are going to get a good price. Suddenly, one of the crew members rushes into the office, telling the captain that there is a mermaid. The captain freaks out when he hears this because he can't believe that they just finished handling pirates, but are now being attacked by mermaids. The crew member then clears the air, telling him that the pirates were keeping a mermaid captive under the deck of the ship. Upon hearing this, Turan, the captain, and the old man decide to go check it out. The captain asks Turan if he would like to see the mermaid, and Turan says yes. As they make their way to where the mermaid is, Turan asks them if mermaids sell for a high price. The old man reveals that if it is a female mermaid, the rich lords on the mainland who have nothing but money and bones will pay the highest fee for a female mermaid. Just then they enter where the mermaid is being held, and they are ultimately disappointed to find out that it is a young male mermaid. The captain mentions that this will only go for a little price because the rich nobles have no interest in male mermaids unless it is a legendary royal who can transform into a fish. The mermaid hears this and yells at them, calling the captain an insolent fool for addressing him as just a male. The mermaid mentions that he is Armani, the 47th prince of North Estadale, so he wants them to show him respect because he is above them. Turan turns to the captain, asking him if Armani is seriously saying he is royalty, and the captain says yes. The captain says Armani might think it is the only way they are going to keep him alive and sell him, so he just might be bluffing. The captain then asks Armani if he can transform into a fish, and he says no. The captain asks him why he cannot, and he replies that it is because he's being restrained and out of the water, for that matter. He says he has to enter the sea and in a perfect state to be able to transform. The captain and Turan stare at each other when they hear this, since it appears that Armani is only looking for a way to escape. The captain asks Turan what he plans to do, and Turan asks if it is true that mermaids eat humans. The captain says this is true, and Turan says he has no choice but to kill Armani, since he is not worth any money. Turan says it is going to be a jackpot if what Armani said is true, but if they release him into the sea and he escapes, they are just going to look like fools. Turan then stretches his hand toward Armani as he prepares to kill him with ice magic. Armani yells at him, asking him what the hell he is doing. Armani continues begging for his life, revealing that he has never eaten a human in his life and he doesn't intend to do so. This is enough for Turan to back down, and Armani desperately tells Turan that if he spares him, he is going to give him treasure. Turan then holds back, and he asks Armani if he means what he said. Armani confirms this, saying there are treasures left behind by the Freyan gods that humans worship. Soon afterward, they arrive at a dock, and while the crew is celebrating that they have finally reached land after a long time, Turan has another plan. It turns out that he has decided to get into a boat and travel with Armani to where he claims the treasure is. Since it is not far from where they are docked, Turan mentions that he is going to leave and return that night. Moments later, Turan binds Armani's hands with chains and he puts him in a boat so that they can head to where the treasure is. Armani asks Turan if he thinks he is going to run away, which is why he puts him in chains. Armani assures Turan that he is a prince, so he keeps his promise. However, Turan ignores him, and Armani asks Turan if he is promising that he is going to let him go if the treasure is there. Turan confirms this, and Turan rolls the boat out with his magic. Armani then tells Turan not to blame him if he is disappointed after seeing it. He mentions that it is a Freyan treasure, so it is only counted as amazing by the standards of land people like Turan. Turan assures him that he doesn't care and that what he wants is for him to lead the way. That night, they arrive at the location, and Turan takes off his shirt before diving into the water. He swims toward the location, but when he reaches there, he is left with a huge surprise, as there is a giant snake waiting for him at the supposed treasure.